Liberal men are soy boys. Debate me. Okay, that's the debate tonight. Well, I always think it's nighttime. I'm just, doing live in the morning. This morning, our debate is liberalism rejecting masculinity. We got a couple of gentlemen joining us to have this debate. Sir, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, before we start, one of us is going to have to change, right?
Well, we're not completely wearing the same thing, but I was wearing it first, so I mean.
Well, so I've been told by Alex Jones that you wear the beanie because you have the, what did he say? He said, Tim Pool has the mark of the beast on his forehead, and he hides it because he's the Antichrist.
Well, I mean, he calls it the mark of the beast. It's a pentagram.
Okay. But yeah, I'm the Soy Pill. I make video essays. I'm a progressive. I'm a soy boy. But I try to own it, and try to fight the stereotype. But
all right. He's a soy boy.
Yeah.
And you are not a soy boy, sir?
I don't know if I would identify myself as such necessarily. I'm simply a guy who talks about politics on the internet. My name is John Doyle, and I'm glad to be back on the program.
I don't know. He looks like he works out more than you do.
Well, he's got to, that's the thing. That's why he calls himself the Soy Pill. His job and why he exists in the ecosystem is to sort of be a lightning rod and be like, soy boys? Absolutely not. Look at me. I go to the gym. So it's like a costume. I mean, I respect a good physique, but it has to be that way because it's
Respecting a man's physique
it's
pretty soy, I got to say.
It's the month for that.
You're checking me out. Like
I didn't say that, but
Yeah.
no, I mean, it's indicative of discipline and things like that, which, 99% of people on your side would reject, but it's good for you. I'm happy for you personally.
Well, we'll try to change that. That's kind of the point.
Okay, well, let's get into that. I mean, that's the general idea. There's a couple elements to this. We were going over what is the core theme yesterday, and it's that masculinity is incompatible with liberalism was one of the arguments, or that liberalism rejects masculinity. I guess that's your argument. Do you want to kick off what you mean by this?
Yeah, that's absolutely true, whether you look at it from like a fundamental perspective where the idea behind liberalism is more or less derivative of this like blank slate. John Locke, father of liberalism, that we are all these blank slates, and if there is to be a masculine or feminine identity, that is simply because of what's popularly, I guess, argued to be like a social construct or something, but it's not something that's really rooted in nature. There is no natural way for men and women to behave, and insofar as we see those throughout society or history, it's because men typically have oppressed women for whichever reason. And so I would say that it rejects the concept of masculinity, and there are ways to intellectualize this and, what is a real man or something, but I would just say that it's how men typically tend to behave when left to their own devices. And moreover, I would say it rejects it in terms of its political implementation, because when liberalism or liberals tend to get in power, what we tend to see is not only they're being rejected by men who are maybe more normal or masculine, as you see, whether it's you're looking at who men are voting for, or you look at maybe the most extreme manifestations of left-wing men in the country. Look at like the Antifa mugshots. They all tend to look a certain way. And then when liberals get into power, they persecute masculinity. They make male behavior illegal. They empower women. They demonize men throughout the culture, things of that nature. There's even like a biological component, which I know we've covered on the show before with RFK and different things they're putting into the...
What male behavior is like illegal from like...
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, first of all, patriarchy, fatherhood, courting, all things like that.
Illegal, though?
Yes. Yeah. In many cases, like typical male behavior, which would be used to take control of your household, to meet a woman, things like that are culturally enforced to either be, denigrated or demonized. Or in some cases, like, you can have, police harass you if you make, or maybe coworkers harass you or HR harass you for making an inappropriate comment at the office or something like that.
Well,
but that's not illegal.
I would say to the illegal component, there is not that on the books it says being a man is illegal. Like, obviously, beating your wife is illegal, and it should be. However, there are circumstances where, because of this system, the balances of it, men who don't beat their wives, who actually get beaten by their wives, will still have the police called on them, and they are more likely to get arrested.
Yeah, but that's not making masculinity illegal. That's a concept of these, perceived gender roles. Women are perceived as weaker, and frankly, mostly are. So if that does happen, it's just a matter of like, hey, there's this big guy. Huh?
I said women are weak.
Yeah, well, just in general, they're on a spectrum. Like, no, people like get to mad at the left for like rejecting the reality of like, most women are weaker than most men, which is true. But like that does come back and hurt men too sometimes when it's like, oh yeah, like how could this woman be beating this man? Like how could that possibly happen? But that's a factor of viewing women as less.
I'm just saying, if we're going to view the law as a rigid it is as it is that I would disagree with you, John. It's not illegal to be a man, but if we're looking at the function of what law does, because typically we don't. I bring this up all the time. There are laws in the books we don't actually enforce.
Sure.
Like my favorite, as I was reading this book, and it said it's illegal in Boston to cool a pie on your windowsill on Tuesday or something.
Well, yeah, because it interferes with air traffic when the people float through the air.
Well, back in the day, it was bears. It's like you live in a small village, you don't want a bear coming by, don't put food on your windowsill, but now who cares, right?
It's the results of social incentives, cultural programming, which create the same effect, a deterrent that would be, created perhaps by a law that's enforced, but without having the bad optics of like literally making it illegal to be a man or something. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's an apparatus of law that is anti-male or masculine.
I don't know. I don't see that. So I hear what you're saying. I think a problem with the left is for years being a straight white guy, it was like the norm, right? And then finally the left starts getting into power and it's like, hey, let's highlight all these marginalized voices, right? Like women come here, black people come here, trans voices, gay voices, whatever. And the problem is now it's not focused on men. And a lot of these pendulum swinging people are like, yeah, you guys are the patriarchy, you guys are the cishet white males. And there is like a attack or at least a narrative against that. But I don't know, it kind of reminds me of something like white privilege, like that term, where if you look like back in the 90s and 2000s, I want to say like kind of everyone just accepted like, oh yeah, black people get treated worse by the police. Like they have it worse off. Like there's the, what's that Onion skit where it's like, this is America. No one deserves to be treated like a black man, right? Like, yeah, it's like they rule that a white woman could be treated as a black man. That's like, right. And it's like, that was kind of like culturally accepted. But as soon as you introduce the term like white privilege, now you have people like, white guys, like even me, when I first heard this in high school, I was like, what the fuck does that mean? Like I have problems, right? Like things are happening to me that are out of my control that suck. And now you're telling me my life's just better. Like this is kind of this weird term that's like attacking the people that really haven't done anything wrong in a way to frame the idea that other people are less well off. And I see that kind of happening with men now where they're no longer centered because it was the norm for so long. And so people feel rejected from the left. But really the left is this umbrella of, hey, yeah, you can be a soy boy, you can be like a little Twinkie guy, femme, coded, gay, whatever. But you can also be masculine. But those traditionally masculine people, which is the norm, which most people do fall into, are not, don't feel as welcome because they're not the only thing that's being focused on, which is what the right does, right? It's like, hey, you can be, this is all we are, rather than this is the umbrella that encompasses that. And people like me, like I grew up in the most progressive place like on the planet in San Francisco. I went to like a liberal college, UC San Diego. This is like, all the SJWs. There were people like on the middle of the campus with signs that said like white men bore me, or little posters are like, oh, don't say minorities, say POC, right? Like very, very progressive SJW stuff back in 2016 era. And like none of that made me less masculine or make me want to be less masculine. It just made me say, oh, okay, that's kind of annoying or like that's weird. But like the idea that it's such a turnoff that it's pushing you into a different party is weird to me because like my ideals haven't changed. It's just like, oh, okay, like I can still be me. I can still be this in this party. I'm just not the sole focus.
I don't think it's about sole focus or centering or anything. I mean, if you even are familiar with like the average temperament or disposition of a conservative or a Republican, these are people who fundamentally like just want to be left alone. Like you don't have to go and talk to a bunch of like Trump supporters and appeal to them as like the white vote or the straight vote or things of that nature. And I think it is actually pushing people who otherwise would have preferred to identify themselves with like the predominant party into the arms of Republicans or Trump, as has been the case with a lot of media personalities, for example, because they do feel ostracized, not just because of maybe some of the excesses that you see on the college campus with like a sign or a t-shirt that says like boys are icky or like down with white power or something, but because the policies which these people are pursuing ultimately are dispossessing normal white Americans, and they're becoming more aware of that, which is why they're walking away. They may agree with you on, wanting to be left alone, people can have their own identity, but at the end of the day, when that party gets into power, they act in ways which dispossess normal Americans, takes money from them, opportunities from them, and redistributes it to literally the entire world and demonizes them throughout the culture. So I would like it to be some umbrella. I think that would be nice, but that's not what we tend to see when you guys get into power. And even in your own case.
The issue is that even as you're describing it, people view politics and people of all generations as a single group. So when you say things like, it's the right, they're, white masculine men or whatever, and the left is trying to lift up voices that aren't actually white men, that is saying that the younger generation of liberals have an issue with boomers and Gen X, so they penalize Gen Z men in a way that these Gen Z men can't comprehend or not. They were not party to.
I think it's perceived as penalizing. I don't think it is, but I know what you mean.
But it is.
That's the thing. Well,
no, but it is.
Like I have never
holding
felt penalized.
a group
millennial
attacking white people, insulting white people, and then they're allowed to do it, is creating a condition by which you are allowed to be racist to a group of men that did not experience this white privilege that was described.
Sure, but like
so that's penalizing.
Well, first of all, again, as much as I have a problem with the term white privilege, I think you can look at like statistics of do white people get as much shit as black people.
Great. Now let's go back to what I was saying about Gen Z.
I'm just saying, how about we do experience it, but the problem is like
let's talk about my point.
We can.
An 18-year-old man did not experience the white privilege of a 55-year-old white man.
You're
and
saying
so
like
an
economics, like
an 18-year-old who's entering the world and saying, "Man, it's really hard on me," and then the left in these colleges say, "Ha, you're white, you're bad, you're stupid, you bore me." And when they go, "Please stop making fun of me," they go, "No, you have white privilege." And he goes, "No, the old guy might have, but I don't."
Well, that's the thing is when I say, hey, generationally, you can look at the way that these races have been treated. And yeah, like you're not experiencing the boomer housing market, right? Like I am not as well off as my parents. They bought a house for like, $300,000 and it's now worth like $1 bajillion. I would never be able to afford that. I probably never will be able to. I just have to wait for them to die. But that's not the same thing as white privilege.
BlackRock will get it before that.
Huh?
BlackRock will get it before that.
That's true. That's true.
Not even joking.
Yeah. No. The idea that like that has something to do with like the way that different races are treated by some sort of system, I think is irrelevant. But the point is, this is what I'm saying is like, you don't feel white privilege. I'm not like, oh boy, what a great day. Well, I am like, what a great day to be white. Cause like, let's be real. It's kind of hard to be all the other races, but you're not feeling this advantage. It's the point is like, if it was framed as something like black detriment.
I actually disagree with you about it's so hard to be the other races.
Harder? Oh, what, cause you're Korean?
Yeah, when I was growing up, I was told that if I put down that I was Mexican, I would get free stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, so my parents told me not to put down that I was Asian when I was applying for anything because I'd be discriminated against.
You're talking about like DEI policies and how like, or maybe like an affirmative action thing that's like trying to correct a historical record. So like a white person might feel like, well, this guy, because this happened to me in college. Like I saw people that were maybe not as like smart as me get advantages, maybe because it was like a, SWE is like Society of Women Engineers. Like they'd get certain opportunities or scholarships. And it's like, well, shit, like I didn't get $10,000 to just go and do this like one particular thing. It's literally just because you have a vagina. That does happen.
Female privilege.
Sort of.
Literally.
But the point is like, if you're looking at it as a societal thing, it's like that is something that in this specific, minutia of college, yeah, there are people that are going to be lifted up over maybe white people, but you don't see that as privilege insofar as like, hey, I don't feel like I'm getting the better end of the deal. In fact, these people are, but it's talking about a historical thing of, oh, these people had it worse off for so long. But that's why I would call it like a black detriment and not like a white privilege. But this is back to your point on, what was it?
What does that mean, though,
the
that
point
had it worse for so long? I mean, we've been following the vector of like progressivism and civil rights for 60 years now. Yeah. And by any metric, I mean, whether it's like familial wealth, house ownership, which
black
you alluded
generational wealth right now is like similar levels to like Reconstruction era. It's not very good.
Exactly. So we've been following this vector of progressivism and saying that this is to make up for injustices of the past. And this vector would suggest that those injustices have been alleviated because it's now illegal to discriminate in varying capacities. But the situation
why
has
would
not
it suggest
improved.
that it's been alleviated?
Because we have the civil rights movement, the Great Society, all of these fruits, which has made it illegal for you to discriminate in the ways that you're alluding to in terms of these past injustices.
Yeah, but like,
so if that's been made, if that's been made illegal, then it would suggest that maybe these injustices were not orchestrated from the top down, people just being mean and racist for no reason, but that there are just cultural things that are different between people who exist in America, which is why there really hasn't been a big change between the 60s and now in terms of how groups are performing.
I would argue that blockbusting and redlining, which still exists today illicitly, would be the argument against that.
Redlining, if you look at the actual counties which were affected, it didn't take into account things like credit score, income. If you actually look at the data behind redlining, it's just it's a liberal talking point the same way that blockbusting.
Blockbusting is when, still to this day, real estate agents will intentionally buy a house, move a black family into a white neighborhood, then solicit the residents there to sell their properties because, quote, there goes the neighborhood, and then try and buy the houses on a premium. And then what they do is they buy the house, rent it to a black family, go to all the houses and say property values will go down because a black family moved into your neighborhood. You need to sell to us now. They'll get the property for a premium. Then a year later, they move the black family out, restore the prices up to where they are in the market. This was made illegal in the 80s, but it was a principal way by which they perpetuated this. We still see this today where it is typically recognized as a racist market fact. Like, I'm not saying there's an individual who's racist who hates black people, but You go to any real estate agent and ask them, like, hey, you've got investment properties. What would you do if a black family moved next to your investment property? They're going to tell you they're going to sell.
Yeah.
And they're going to say, look, I've got no problem with a black family. Tons of friends are black, but the market will react negatively to this. So I probably don't want to lose money and I would sell. That concept perpetuates since the 80s. So I don't know how you get rid of this. You know, it's funny because even liberals do it. Like the story that I've told is a woman that I worked with who was this progressive Hispanic woman. She said that she inherited a property in New York City from her, grandpa or from her family or whatever. She was woke, as one could describe woke. And I said, what would you do if a black family moved next door to your property? She goes, oh, I'd sell right away. And I was like, isn't that racist? And she goes, I'm not trying to be racist, but like my property would lose all its value right away. And I'm like, okay, so long as you believe that and perpetuate it, that's going to cause problems to the net worth and like the generational wealth of black families.
Right.
So
it's not illegal, right? And
it's not illegal.
Like stuff like that happens all the time. That's kind of what people describe when they talk about systemic racism. It doesn't take a single individual being like, oh, I hate black people, like throw them in jail, although that does still happen. And that's the other thing is like you talk about like, yeah, it is illegal. Yeah, we did pass the civil rights law, but like, kicking and screaming, half the country was fighting against it. And those people didn't disappear and their kids probably have very similar values. We are becoming more progressive, but the idea that like, oh, well, because it's illegal, it's gone now is just like not borne out. Like these things absolutely still happen. These people still hold these views in a lot of different places. So
of course it is. I mean, if there were any evidence that it were actually happening, even on the individual level, like this is the example that comes to mind. Look at like what happened to Papa John. Papa John literally said the N-word in a meeting, telling employees of what not to say.
No.
He was quoting someone, right?
Papa John said something to the effect of, how come Colonel Sanders said N-word and he got no flack for this? Okay. Why is that acceptable? He was condemning that Colonel Sanders used a slur and no one cared, and they used that against him to strip him of everything.
The point being, it's such
maybe
a
I can use this to pivot back to the topic, though. Actually,
any instance of racism, you can file civil suits, you can do whatever. It can become a national media thing. You can get a book tour, whatever it is. If these instances were actually existing, even at the individual level, and so I feel like it's this like game of whack-a-mole, where it's like, oh, surely these things must be being caused by institutional racism, even at like the individual level. Whereas, I mean, maybe we've got the thing with the blockbusting, but there are also things like education, school funding, crime rates, of course, all sorts of different things that we could use to explain the outcomes of different cultures in this country that we can't quite find so precisely with things like institutional racism or even, anecdotally.
But all of those things you just mentioned can be products of the institutional racism, like blockbusting, where it's like, hey, this like entire neighborhood of black people is just more poor because of something that started off as a racism thing, or maybe from someone who was well-meaning, a liberal, progressive, woke person, and yet this is now downstream effects. The property values are lower. That means the school is going to be underfunded. Like this is all like
that's why they get
together.
Funding from the federal government.
They don't. It's like 10%, I think, for like public schools. Right?
On average, I think schools that are majority minority receive like 1% greater funding from the federal government than schools that are predominantly white. Even I mean, they even have better credentialed teachers with advanced degrees. They get more funding. And I remember I went down to Cass Tech High School in Detroit because I was trying to do a fundraiser one time, and it was better than my high school, which was in Birmingham Public Schools. It was supposed to be like one of the better districts. And I go down to Cass Tech High School, and I'm like walking in between like crackheads and human feces, and I go into what looks like a Silicon Valley startup building, and I was like, okay, this is like pretty advanced. Yet I don't know how many kids in Detroit schools are literate. So clearly there's something else going on. I don't know about
like 1%. I don't think is going to make a huge difference, and I could just fire back an anecdote. At least I grew up in a particularly poor neighborhood, and I was in like the okay kind of middle of the line mixed school, but all the schools down in Richmond, which is like a notoriously poor neighborhood, were really bad. There's like gunfights, drugs, people getting. I mean, there's literally. I think a movie about just how bad there was, like Coach Carter or something like that. Like these are really, really bad schools. The property values are really low, and these kids like they grow up, they don't have anything. They don't have a lot of opportunities. I don't think you can just attribute this to like, well, it's just the cultural thing. But the culture is downstream of definitely things that happen due to them being in these like segregated ghettos, essentially.
I don't know, man. I
wanted to focus back to the masculinity thing because you mentioned the Papa John thing of this idea that like, he didn't actually do anything wrong. I don't think he quoted someone, who did something wrong to disparage that racist guy, right? Yeah. And then the reaction was, let's cancel Papa John, despite the fact that if you look at this in context, this man has no ill will towards black people. This man is specifically trying to call out racism. And I think that's kind of what's going on with the masculinity thing, where you get this concept of like toxic masculinity. I know you covered the Gillette commercial, right? Where like everyone freaked out because it was like calling out men. And like,
it wasn't calling out men. It's
like men
stereotyping
better, right?
and disparaging them.
Right. And like this idea that like the pendulum swing back to the left is, hey, For so long, we've seen these bad behaviors, and rather than try to like integrate and like, hey men, like let's fix men as men, it's more of this like, hey guys, like look at patriarchy, look at this, like, you know, the men control everything, the white people are oppressing us, and like this idea does alienate people because you hear this and like you're like, well, even if you're not one of those people, it's like, oh well, why are you being mean to me? Like you said, like why are you pushing this on me? And the reaction of like, the concept of toxic masculinity becomes this like, oh, so being masculine is bad, even though it's trying to describe the worst parts of masculinity. It's unfortunate that like people just hear that and they get turned off instantly, and it's like this overreaction from the left that causes an even more overreaction from the right to push them away.
I have a question. How come the toxic masculinity and patriarchy and white supremacy narratives don't exist in other countries to their dominant racial groups? Like in China, how come there's no like left side of their, you know, political spectrum saying Han supremacy is bad and, you know, Chinese people are oppressors?
Well, I don't know specifically much about China. Do they not like lock up dissidents to a degree there? Or?
Oh yeah, it's the point being like, where is their political movement calling out their moral or racial or ethnic supremacy?
I don't know if there is one for like racial or moral. I mean, you can look at
it seems like
the concept of Taiwan or Hong Kong and these people kind of rebelling against the leadership there. But
they're the
I
same
can't speak.
ethnic background.
Yeah, I don't.
Taiwan is the original Republic of China. It's a difference of political ideology.
Sure, but I think they'd consider themselves like different peoples, right? Or maybe I don't know. I'm not like.
Well, the Taiwanese are going to say they're Taiwanese for sure, and China is going to say the Taiwanese are Chinese. My point is, in the United States, the only group with racial outgroup preference are white liberals. Blacks, Asians, Latinos have a racial in-group preference. And white conservatives have a racial in-group preference. White liberals have a racial out-group preference.
You say out-group preference, like if you poll them, they're like more likely to support their community than the party or something?
No, they're more likely to support non-white people.
Okay, and so white liberals are the only group that would support non-white liberals.
So racial out-group, meaning black people are more likely to vote for and support black people. Mm-hmm. Latinos are more likely for Latinos, Asians for Asians, white conservatives for white people, and white liberals for any other race.
Sounds like white liberals are the least racist people.
I would argue that makes them the most racist.
Well, if we're willing to vote for anyone in our outgroup?
No, it means they don't support white people. It means they have a preference.
They specifically have an anti-white bias, you're saying?
Yes. Well, we call it racial outgroup preference.
Well, what I heard from that is like, oh, they're willing to support anyone other than specifically white people, which is kind of what my experience has been in like San Francisco. It's not. Let me be clear. There are people on like the fringe left that are like, oh, fuck white men for sure. But for the most part, it's just like, hey, like I'll support anyone regardless of their politics, and like that's kind of what that sounded like to me, or at least maybe that was me projecting my experience onto what you were saying.
Like progressive activists, one might say, are nuts, but they do hold a disproportionate amount of power among the liberal faction in this country, be it the Democrats or otherwise. And then you see how they implement this in universities and at protests with the progressive stick. If you're a white man, shut up, sit down, don't speak.
See, that's the thing is I experienced that, right, at the SJW college, UCSD, right? And I even took a gender studies class. They had like a requirement DEI class, right? So like I thought like going in, I would watch Tim Pool. I would watch like anti-SJW content. And I thought this was going to be like the wildest thing ever. And going into that, it was really just kind of tame. Like sometimes they would say some wild stuff, but it was never like, hey, you're a white man, sit down, shut up. If anything, I was the guy talking in class the most, like because I was the one who was more opinionated. I wanted to have these conversations. I was really interested in like, hey, like this seems like an insane idea. Can I push back on it? Like no one ever like marginalized me for being white. At the worst, there was maybe some rhetoric, but that's kind of like my whole thing about this masculinity thing is, yeah, I get some bad things coming at me. Yeah, maybe some like mean comments, but that's like really the extent of it. Like I don't feel discriminated against, and like why let that change like who I am and my politics and make me feel like it didn't make me feel like I couldn't be myself in the liberal party.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I know we all have our opinions and that's our prerogative, but we do live in a two-party system, which is to say that you have to at some point align yourself with whichever party you believe is going to be a better approximation of how you want the world to look. And so I have, complete respect for your opinions and your experience and you aligning yourself with progressives, maybe even voting for Democrats. But the problem is that when Democrats are in charge, whether that be expressly in political institutions or even culturally, you do see that demonization, which maybe is caricaturized in something like a Gillette commercial. But even then, I mean, you can trace this back to growing up and you may not feel feel like, a mean comment here or there is really like stripping you of some identity. But it is true that girls are encouraged. Boys are treated like they're defective girls. Girls are the example. You're supposed to behave and sit up straight and do all this. And boys are being plugged into this learning environment, which is frankly like alien to them in the way that boys tend to learn versus girls. And so a lot of them just check out
on some of these. Because like I said, like my middle school was the most progressive private middle school like you could ever like go to, and like I was never shamed for being a boy. They to be fair, I did a little rowdy stuff and I got in trouble for that, but it was never like, oh, you need to sit down and shut up like a girl. Like I'm a little confused.
Right, but the fact is that males tend to have a more tactile learning basis,
like hands-on sort of stuff. Yeah,
physical activity. Things like that, a requirement for more physical activity. But the entire school system is, we give you 7 hours of sit down and shut up, and we give you half an hour of go run and play,
recess, yeah.
Where boys probably need substantially more tactile learning. And so what John's saying is, it's not that they're going to the boys and saying, you're a boy, you're bad. They're saying, behave in the way we've outlined.
Right, which is
as
against
it pertains,
their nature is kind of the argument. Like
it's just more feminine. It's more female centric.
It creates conditions which are going to make them less successful, and it tries to elevate women into being more successful. Let alone to mention, the things, all these programs, outreach, women in STEM, everything like that.
Can we pause? Because when you say they're going to be less successful, I mean, this has kind of been how we've done schooling for decades, right? Like this wasn't really borne out in the past 100 years that men were less successful because they were feminized in school?
No, that's not. I guess you can say feminized, but
that was what you guys were saying. They're saying like
take a look at the last 100 years.
The last 100.
Quite literally, I think the argument would support that over the last 100 years of industrialized, institutionalized learning facilities, it has been to the detriment of men, and we can see that substantially.
Like what metric? I mean, like the
men are more likely to commit suicide. They don't live as long.
I think
they're more likely to be unemployed. They're more likely to be unemployed right now, especially in this generation, millennials and Gen Z. They're more likely to live at home with their parents, not have jobs, not go to university.
This to 10 years ago or 20 years ago, maybe, yeah, sure. But if we're looking at past 100 years, and you talked about industrialization, where it's like, yeah, I think just on a whole, everyone is better off post 1860s, like invention of factories, like.
The point is this:
cities,
since we've implemented this institutionalized learning industrialization, you've had a downward trend, and
that's what I'm asking.
That doesn't mean
what
it's the
industrialized
sole
learning are you talking about?
Industrialized learning is when. Pre-industrial revolution, you had small schoolrooms, sort of, where it was
like the schoolhouse with the one teacher and the 20 kids or whatever.
And even then, it wasn't entirely that way. A lot of kids would just learn from their parents, or through correspondence, or through self-study, or through their, largely.
Yeah, but I mean, if we're comparing industrialized, to that, you wouldn't say like we're smarter, better off than that as a whole. I mean, I feel like most people are doing better, absolutely, than the 1850s learning.
But we're not talking about technological advancement. We're talking about the structure of society.
Yeah, I'm talking about life expectancy, happiness, like
technological advancement. Indeed, has continued to go up, largely due to oil.
Down actually, in
the 1850s.
No, maybe not from the 1850s, but quite recently, life expectancy has dipped, I think, in the last 5 or 10 years or so, particularly for white men who have been so vilified unfairly. And what was the other one? Happiness. I don't know how you would quantify that.
That is a hard one for sure.
The general social survey, or, as Tim mentioned, suicide rates. That's a pretty good.
No. Just I think it's quite simple. I mean, happiness is relative. It's subjective, and humans adapt. But the fact that we have a large portion of the younger generation of men, their NEETs, not in employment, education, and training, is indicative of a failure of our society towards men.
Yeah.
Women are more likely to go to university and graduate than men by it's like 60-40 now.
But their suicide rates are up as well, right? I would say men are better at everything, so that's why we kill ourselves more, because we're better at it, and they're more likely to do. I mean, people always bring up gun deaths, right? Like I think half of them, there's like 13,000 of them per year. Liberals will complain about this, and gun. Yeah, most of them are suicides, and if you have a gun, it's easier, and women tend to do things like wrist stuff, pills, things that you can recover from. And I think it's one of those things where people are unhappier in the trends right now because of what you're talking about, because you look at your boomer dad and your Gen X dad, and it's like, well, what the fuck? You got all these opportunities and I don't get any of these, and there's all these expectations. It's like, what's the big lie of just go to college, you'll be successful? And I graduated college. I was one of the lucky ones. A lot of people just didn't get jobs out of college. They're struggling. I can't afford a house. The only people I know in my generation, I'm 29, that have a house are the 2 engineers that got married. And even then, they're not in California. They're in Colorado. They're in, some other place where the cost of living is much easier. So I think this idea that this is because of the demonization of men is not nearly so borne out as it is people had this expectation of what life was supposed to be, and it's just not happening. And so all these as a whole society in our generation is more unhappy because we're not getting what we want. We don't have the house. We don't have the white picket fence.
So once again, the issue is if you're an 18-year-old white man and you grew up in a society, you've experienced no privilege.
Why do you say that? No privilege. Like when I say because you don't have the Gen X privilege, right? You don't have that economy. But when it's like, hey, like, because again, I hate the word privilege here because it's like you don't feel the idea of black people or your cops are less likely to attack you
because that's black, not right. Because what I would say is the challenge with what you're describing is it's based on class for the most part. It's with sometimes a racial component.
I was reading a study actually from, I want to say this is it's on a book called How Fascism Works, which is like the most liberal book I could have brought up here. But it was talking about the hiring practices of people who report themselves as former convicts. And it was like black versus white, not a former convict, black versus white, former convict. And for like the black who are not a former convict, the percentage of whether or not you get hired is already like 10 times lower or something ridiculously low. And then for the black convict level, even the white former convicts were getting like hired at like a 10 to 5% higher rate. It does seem like there is at least this product of, and people call that privilege. I don't like that because if I'm a white guy not getting hired, I don't feel privileged, right? That's why I don't like the word.
So the issue is there's no such thing as white privilege. That is a fact statement, not an opinion.
What do you mean by that? Because what I just described is what people mean. Because I think that's a bad word.
Because you can when you're trying to determine any kind of like fact basis in science, we look for controls. And when you look at any other non-white nation, these concepts don't exist. However,
we're a unique nation. The history
meaningless. Similar.
No, I'm saying it's meaningless.
So if I finish the point that I'm trying to make, instead of you interrupting before the point can be completed,
okay.
The Han Chinese, for instance, have an ethnic majority and supremacy, and they experience what one would define as a privilege.
Okay.
But it's not because it's white privilege.
Yeah, it's Han privilege, sure.
It's just majority privilege. A nation's ethnic and cultural majority tends to dictate what they want and what they expect.
Okay.
That will never go away nor change.
Well, I think it can change. I think if expectations change. But you just described it. The point is...
So the point that I was making...
You're agreeing with the concept, which
there's no white privilege. And if you are a Gen Z white man, you've never experienced such a thing. So when they say, white guys would go and apply for a job, they get it. And now a 17-year-old white guy applies and they go, no white people, get out. And he goes, there's no privilege because there isn't.
No white people? I'm sure this has happened before, but like, is there like a massive influx of people like we don't hire white people? I mean, first of all, it's literally illegal, right?
It should be, but this is typically what the left supports. So we interviewed a pro skateboarder
supporting the idea of we can't hire white men. Like,
absolutely,
they're supporting the idea of like I worked at
Floyd era went in the to people of color to women in the S&P 100 or something.
Boosting a marginalized group is not the same as saying no white men. If there are people that say you cannot hire white men,
it's a matter of
because
policy.
You're assuming it's a
illegal
to
hire white men.
Yeah, no. Wait, what? It's illegal to hire a white man?
If he started a company and all he were hiring were white men, T-minus what until a lawsuit comes in? They would be investigated. You cannot start an S&P 100 company or some serious company without hiring at least some women, some minorities. So it's illegal to hire based on merit, which yes, in practice makes
that's
it
not illegal to be hired
based
on merit, first of all, because the idea that
sure
because you're describing it like, they just found a black woman on the street and they're like, get in here, right? Versus like, hey, when you look at a pool of qualified candidates, you can't select one race, which is a very different thing. And it's not a zero-sum game. You have a bunch of different slots. If it was one slot and you're like, for this one job, you can't hire a white guy. I think like the only thing that would ever make sense for that is if you're like casting for a show and it's this character's black, right?
But it is a fact that this happens. That white guys are passed over.
Right, but you're describing it as a phenomenon that is so widespread that every 18-year-old Zillennial is experiencing this, which is, at least in my experience, is like growing up in this progressive area, in the most progressive place on the planet. This is not happening. I'm not getting discriminated against for being white. Like I said, I'll get some insults here or there, but it's not
That's called being discriminated against for being white, yes.
Okay, sure, but not on an institutional level for jobs. Like no one's like, we're not hiring.
What are you comparing it to?
I'm comparing it to like every other white person that I graduated with, like all the white people around me. Like none of these people are
generations don't experience the same thing as the other generation. Like literally, Gen Z men are struggling.
I am in Gen Z technically, and I grow up around, I hang out with a lot of younger people because I had a deferred college like graduation. So.
Would you agree that Gen Z men are struggling?
Yes, absolutely, but I don't think it's because of white men discrimination.
I didn't say it was. It's a component.
Yeah.
The point is when the left comes out and says we want affirmative action in hiring and colleges and public contracting, the 17 or 18-year-old white man is going, whatever it is you think boomers got, I don't have. I don't get. So when you create a racially discriminatory system, you have created a privilege for certain classes of people.
Yeah, in that specific thing. Yeah, absolutely. And this is what I was talking about. Like, you don't, even if, like, just for a second, assume that the phenomenon that we both agree exists is called white privilege, just because that's what people call it. it exists insofar as like, yeah, this person might be preference in this specific area, or you might not just face the same problem as a black person here, but you don't experience white privilege. You don't. I don't feel the absence of something. Well, you agree the majority group in control is going to have some sort of like in-group preference for that same.
Which for the past 15, 20 years has been liberal left. So they're white critical.
To an extent. I mean, our country is not like a liberal left majority ruled by. They're not like the majority.
When Jack Dorsey was in charge of X, for instance, if you post FBI crime stats, you'd get banned.
I'm sorry. Your example of whether or not white men or liberals are in control is just Twitter not allowing like.
Perhaps I could describe it as Facebook, YouTube, and X, the 3 largest social media platforms in the country and the world.
Social media is a big component of our lives.
Banning people for posting fact data because it was deemed racist.
Yeah, but that's not just posting the fact data. Almost if you're posting like 1350 stuff, it's because you're trying to paint a greater narrative of, black people have a crime gene or something.
So you're not disagreeing with me?
I'm saying that if you're using the example of like, oh, look at our institutions and how they're overwhelmingly liberal. If you're talking about social media, yeah, they were for a while. I think that has since shifted, obviously, especially
and major
Twitter.
Cities, institutions are liberal as well.
Major cities, yeah. But if you're talking about like the country as a whole, jobs, like all these places, this is not like everything everywhere. Like it is absolutely part of it, 100%. And like half the country, sure, is like liberal, progressive, not progressive, liberal at the very least. But the idea that like that is the same as saying like a white majority in group is just not like borne out. There's not like, I guess you might say like certain people might discriminate against your politics in certain areas. Definitely in San Francisco, I've had people who are MAGA leaning at the least. But like that is not the same as like a white in-group preference. This is like
there's not a debate on this issue. This is a fact statement that we had Supreme Court hearings over as to liberal institutions not admitting hiring white people.
But that's not what I'm saying.
Now,
you're saying does this happen? I'm saying yeah, obviously. I'm saying this is not the widespread concept of America. Is this in-group privilege for white liberal progressives or liberal progressives? Like, I just don't think that's the case.
No, it's anti-white.
Sure, liberal progressives being the majority in-group, in the same way you might say that America was a primary white in-group preference in like the 60s. Like there's not like that sort of thing going on, like to the extent of like, oh, we're like
the point being the left right now is penalizing young men for something they did not do. It's the sins of the father.
Penalizing how? Like you talk about discrimination, which is true.
If you apply to go to Harvard, you have to score higher substantially than a Latino or black person to get in.
Yeah.
That's called a penalization.
That sort of, but again, this is like
they literally deduct against your score based on your race.
Right, and they do that for like Asians the worst, right, too? It's
I know.
There's like a whole lawsuit about this. Did they get rid of that?
I think they technically didn't. They changed the way they went about it, which was another controversy. I don't know where the lawsuit ended up. It's been a while since we covered that one.
But this is also one of the things where I'm like, I haven't gotten to finish this point, but the idea like you don't experience privilege is like you don't feel less detriment. You don't feel that.
I've only ever felt more from it.
Huh?
I've only ever felt more detriment.
Exactly. You only ever feel it when it's against you. So like if someone is like, oh, like let's just say we're talking about the 1960s, where like obviously you would assume like white privilege exists in the 60s, right?
No.
We can agree. No. Okay. Well,
I don't want to get into that.
I kind of know your politics. I don't want to get into.
You couldn't marry someone who wasn't the same race as you. You couldn't live with them.
Yeah.
Again, I don't like the concession of like, oh, my grandparents were the crazy ones, but I know better. It's like this has been a consistent trend, and in the country's history.
Well, hold on. Wait, I'm literally just saying, was it not obvious that you had a harder life if you were black in the 60s? You can't say no to that. Come on.
Actually, Derek Bell would disagree with you.
I have no idea who that is.
He's one of the founders of critical race theory.
He would say it was easier to be black in the 60s?
His argument is that the end of segregation was a detriment to black people.
Okay, I don't care. Well, that sounds stupid. But
the
point I'm saying is obviously in the time...
This is critical race theory.
Yeah.
He works alongside Kimberly Crenshaw. They wrote the book on this stuff.
Okay.
The argument among the people who advocate the concept of white privilege is that separate spaces for black people, they call them POC spaces, are better.
Safe spaces. No, I experienced that.
I wouldn't call it, they don't call it safe spaces. The argument was from Derek Bell that they said Plessy v. Ferguson was wrong. He says there should be black-only schools. There should be black-only businesses.
Okay, this guy sounds like a radical racist person. I don't like this person.
But this is what
you're describing.
This is critical race theory, the book. This is what the universities are teaching. Derek Bell is a prominent thought leader on this.
In DEI course. I literally took gender studies. I didn't learn about Derek Bell, maybe, but I don't think this is what's like the universal like university. First of all, the fact that I am familiar with so many college people and no one has told me this before. I'm not saying this isn't real, by the way.
But you haven't studied critical race theory.
No, I'm saying this is not like the universally applied theory to most of these places where like, yeah, we need to segregate society.
How much time have you spent in the black community?
A lot, actually.
So during the Ferguson riots, for instance, and the Baltimore riots, they were circulating a letter, the teachings of Derek Bell, advocating for a black-only community space. In fact, I think it was...
a black-only community space is different from 1960s segregation, though.
The argument predicated upon that before the end of segregation, black people had their own economy, their own Wall Street, their own wealth.
Yes, I've heard this
And
before,
after
and it's like, it was better then, right?
And what the argument they're making is that white supremacists, which had always been the Democratic Party, the party of the Klan and Jim Crow and slavery, decided if we allow black people to establish their own economy, they will supplant us. What we need to do, while they're still weak, force them by law to integrate with us so that our institutions will be over them.
Okay, interesting.
That is the critical race theory view of what the end of segregation was.
It was a ploy to subvert the black excellence kind of movement. Like they would have done better on their own.
However you want to describe it, the point was, the question asked by these critical race theorists, these black community leaders, is why did the Democrats do a 180 in a matter of 4 years?
The Southern strategy.
That some people try to make the argument that they were trying to win, but that doesn't change how an entire block of racists suddenly were not racist anymore.
Well,
we're talking about
racists become unracist, or did
the politicians themselves? Yes, they didn't
like Robert Byrd.
They didn't evaporate from the political landscape. They just all of a sudden said, you know what? We agree. We're not racist anymore.
Okay, sure. If the argument is that,
I'm not saying they're right. I'm saying that's the critical race theory argument.
Sure. It seems kind of like a weird conspiracy theory, but the whole point I'm trying to bring up is like, look, if we just talk about white privilege or privilege in general, you don't feel privilege. Like, I don't feel, if I was a 1960s white guy, I'm not like, oh boy, like there's no problems in my fucking life because I'm not, forced to go into the left door instead of the right door, and I don't have to walk
I don't have white privilege at all. I'm mixed race.
Well, hold on. I mean, do you agree that if we're accepting the concept of white privilege in the 60s, that you don't feel privilege if you did have it then? You don't feel like, oh, everything's better. You just don't have it worse, right?
I think what I would say, just to clarify, is ethnic majority access is probably a better way to put it.
Sure. And you don't feel that until it's gone, right? And that's kind of what's happening on the left with men, where it's like we had a big in-group preference for so long, and now because we're focusing on all these other groups, I'm not getting the focus. Me, white men, big muscular guys, people discriminate against me insofar as they're like, oh, like, is that guy here to invade my space? I've been in, like, they would go to these like feminist talk circles in college, and they'd be like, what are you doing here? They give me looks because they're like, you're not like us. You don't look like us. And that feels like, oh, well, shit, like, because we've focused and put the spotlight on these people who never did have it before, now I don't have it. It feels like something's been taken away from me.
That's the same problem regurgitated for a new generation.
Right. And I'm just saying,
choosing anyone based on race is the problem.
I'm saying that feels alienating, and I understand why men are not drawn to that, especially when the right offers them something like, hey, like, we're not doing that. And it's just as simple as that.
The left is basically going like, hey, look at that problem. Let's do the exact same thing again.
I think it happens sometimes, but I don't think it's the exact same thing. For example, like you talked about, if you have a black-only community space, I don't think that is the same thing. As much as I say you don't need to have that necessarily, like you can absolutely have white people working in a community towards the common goal, I don't think they're segregating them because they're like, oh, we hate white people, we don't want them there. It's because they specifically want to hyper-focus the conversation on people who understand the problem because they're from that community, and then spread those ideas to other places, because it's not this exclusive segregating thing.
Do you think it would be good if, like, we took a major city, say Chicago, and then made all the races live in race-specific areas?
No, that
they kind of do that already now. Actually,
that's the point.
Yeah, it kind of already.
That's actually the structure. Naturally,
the level of segregation as it exists now is actually greater than it was even in the '60s, pre the outlawing.
That might be neighborhood segregation, but we're talking about, hey, you can't go in the same bar. You can't,
yeah, but do you know? Hold on.
Over the other.
You're from San Francisco?
Yeah.
I gotta. I want to make this proposal to you, but I also I don't want to be responsible for your death.
You're telling me to go to a gay bar and I'll get...
No. I'd like to bring you to K-Town.
Okay.
And see how long you last.
Why would I...
I'll kill you. You'll just die because you're white.
Okay. I mean, that's bad. People killing people because they're white is bad. Yeah, I don't know.
The point being that in racism and these privilege and these things you describe are just like, I feel like it's largely white people standing on a hilltop looking around being like, look how great we are. We're so great. How come it's so good for us? Why are we so great? These poor minorities. And then like take a stroll through a black neighborhood in Chicago and see what happens.
You know,
to be fair,
what does that have to do with whether
to be
or not
fair, like
white
Hyde
people have
Park's
it
super
easier?
nice.
Is that not an indication?
Because everyone is mad at white people all the time for no reason. Adjacent to the data you mentioned earlier about in-group versus out-group, there's data even showing how races rank each other. If you look at how white people rank themselves relative to other races, it's pretty much a straight line. If you look at how black people rank themselves, it's the first, every other race not so much, white people last.
You need white boy magic.
Same
like
thing with
magic.
Hispanics, same thing with Asians. They all like themselves the most and dislike white people the most. And so that creates a problem when you have these communities. Like you're saying, if you walk through, I know you mentioned in the car you were Jewish, but if you walk through and they identify you as a white guy, that's going to be a problem in these neighborhoods. And so why that is, I mean, do you really think that this education...
Do you think if I said, stop, I'm Jewish, they wouldn't kill me?
No, I don't think they understand sort of the problem there. But I would say that,
if you're in New York and you said, stop, I'm Jewish, you'd get...
They'd kill me extra.
Have you seen what's been going on in New York?
Oh, I saw the thing that happened at that...
well, it's called the knockout game. And what you have is... This is
something else. Okay.
Black men,
I was thinking about
teenagers, have been going around New York attacking Jewish people. Yeah.
Wow.
That's been going on I remember that was an Obama era thing as well. But the point I was trying to make there is if we can agree that, say, minorities are not getting the same access to education that white students are, which maybe I would disagree with, but let's pretend that's the case, then this education they're getting, which a lot of conservatives would say is making them hate America and all this stuff, isn't quite landing with them the same way. They're not getting A's on tests about all the evil white people who are mean to their grandparents, yet they're still doing things like the knockout game.
Did you go to college? Like, is that what they're teaching? Because like I literally took a gender studies class. They're not teaching you that white men are evil. Like one of the coolest things that they taught me in that was about, do you know COINTELPRO? Like that whole program, like the anti-civil rights, like FBI thing.
Okay, so even better. They're not teaching that, but still the races are reporting these attitudes and how they feel about white people versus other races. And so what that would suggest is that, as Tim said, there is some sort of like anti-white cultural, maybe anti-majority cultural narrative that is predominant and that young people are recognizing and they are responding to. They are responding to other people's reaction towards their existence and they are moving away from that.
Right. I agree with you completely. This is what I'm talking about, where it's like this narrative of, hey, these people have been in power so long and these injustices were caused by this group in power. That's framed as, oh, I'm bad because I'm white. And what I'm saying is I went through that whole thing. I went into the trenches of the gender warfare and I didn't come out thinking like, oh, I'm bad because I'm white. I'm bad because I'm a male. I just thought, oh, yeah, like people in the past did things and I don't have guilt for things I never did. And I'm just recognizing like the historical things that might have happened that might have caused these groups to suffer. That's fine. Like that didn't cause me to leave the left. And I'm not saying there's no reason to, because some people do come out of that and they're like, I feel demonized. I understand that 100%. I guess olive branch to those people is like, why let that change your policy if these people aren't actually discriminating against you? They're just at worst kind of being annoying. Like that's really just been my experience. And it's like, that didn't make me less liberal. It didn't make me less progressive. It's just like, oh, okay. Like I don't feel guilt when they're like, oh, we're talking about slavery and white people did slavery. It's like, okay. It's just
simply not true.
I'll put it this way on the race stuff. Chicago is deeply segregated by choice.
Yeah, that happens in like most cities.
But it is enforced.
Right?
It is enforced to one degree by law. So where I grew up, if you crossed 47th from the south to the north, you went from a largely white, somewhat Hispanic neighborhood into an all-black neighborhood. And if you did, you'd get stopped by the cops, and they'd detain you, and they'd usually drive you back.
Is it because they're like, hey, this isn't safe, and we're protecting you?
No, because they said the only reason white boys
here?
come up here is to buy drugs, so you're leaving right now.
Okay, but that's not legally enforced segregation. That's
I said largely enforced by the law, which I meant the cops.
I get
the
what you're saying, but that's a pattern of behavior that they're trying to...
The inverse, however, was that there were several gangs of teenage black girls from north of 47th who would cross down to the south and then mug and rob young girls in the white neighborhood. And the police, it became this huge issue with the local government. And the cops were like, look, we can't do anything about it because if we stop these girls before they commit the crime, we're racist. So we're going to let them keep going. However, the problem is after they've already committed the robberies and the muggings and we know it is a gang, well, then they're gone. What can we do? So it just kept happening in our neighborhood. Okay. This created, so it's like people choose to live near the races they choose, but this created pure racism.
Yeah, that's
and
bad.
Conflict.
I think those cops should have arrested the people doing crimes.
They can't.
Not stopped. Oh, well, they should. I understand.
It's racist.
It's not racist to arrest people who's mugging someone.
How do you arrest someone after they've been mugged and the gang splits up and you don't know who did the mugging?
I mean, you could stop people if they're like, hey, don't get me wrong, this does get applied in poor ways where it's like, hey, a black guy robbed me, and then they stop like every 30 black people. But like, if you give a description of a suspect, you got to go stop them.
I completely agree. That's why I've always been a big supporter of stop and frisk. I think cops need to go and stop as many of these black people who fit descriptions as possible and search them in case they're the ones who committed the robbery, right?
If you're responding to a crime, I think that's very different from just stopping random people that look suspicious on the street all the time like they did in New York. But
if someone fits a description, the cop should stop and frisk them, right?
You mean if they have absolutely no other reason to other than, hey, can
no, they fit a description for a crime, the cops should stop them and frisk them.
I don't know if the rule is that you're allowed to just immediately search them, but if they fit the role of a crime and they want to stop them and ask them.
Cops can pat down, but they can't put their hands in your pockets or bag. They're allowed to feel the outside, and if they feel an object that they believe is a weapon or contraband, then they can probably
I can see ways of it being abused, but again, if the idea is the dichotomy between not being able to stop a criminal suspect and frisking everyone on the street, I guess I don't want no one to be able to be searched.
The issue that arises is you get activist groups that claim it is racism, white supremacy, because too many black people are being stopped.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is stop and frisk specifically was shown to be like extra discriminatory, especially because the majority of the people they were stopping and frisking weren't committing crimes, so it was just harassing kind of people, versus what you just talked about, which is, hey, 5 people just committed a crime, this kind of black person meets the description, and then they go stop people. I think these are very different situations.
Certainly, and the political climate is such that in our neighborhood, the alderman, the mayor, the police, they were like, I am not going to be the person who has to run for office and explain why we're stopping young black girls. I'm not getting involved in that. I don't want to be a racist.
That might be, that is an indication of, I would say, over progressive, correction for a
That's
problem.
what we're arguing against.
Right, but okay, here's the thing.
If
you say toxic masculinity
we're talking about
is an overcorrection for like the patriarchy of men ruling for so long or women being discriminated against. Like, yeah, I can see places where that has gone too far, where it's like, oh, men are evil, kill all men. You see these like super radical feminists, but like this isn't a majority of that movement. And I think that the concept of calling out something like a toxic masculine person shouldn't be alienating to someone who, like, I don't know, I think I embody a lot of traditional traditional masculine traits, except for the beard, and this hasn't forced me out of wanting these progressive policies. That's all I'm saying.
Again, that's the problem here is, like we were talking about education and crime, and on the one hand, it may just be an experience in a college classroom where some kid says something silly and everyone's like, okay, dude, whatever. But these kinds of people are those who grow up to end up being district attorneys who simply refuse to prosecute crimes and who are installed by wealthy progressives who are radical. And that's pretty much the story in almost every major city in the country. And you can hear these anecdotes about like women robbed at gunpoint on video, and the crime doesn't get prosecuted for whatever reason.
Well, I got a
really happened to my mom in Detroit. They had this guy dead to rights on camera, robbed her at gunpoint, and then got into a luxury sedan, which was crazy because I was always told that these people were impoverished. And then he was identified actually on the television, local news, by his parole officer. They bring the guy in, they've got him, and then some person just didn't submit some document in enough time. And so unfortunately, they couldn't get this guy. He ended up getting arrested 2 years later because he sexually assaulted a minor with a gun, and then now he's in prison for like decades. But then my mom had lunch with some woman who lives in one of the suburbs that these people flee to because they're just so crazy making this stuff up about what happens in minority neighborhoods. And she was like, yeah, that's the story. If anything happens to you in Detroit, they just won't prosecute if the victim is white.
I got a question.
Different issue.
Just like a question for this whole debate, be it race or gender or whatever. Is it bad to discriminate against a person based on their immutable characteristics?
Depends on how you're doing it, right? Like,
so that's a no.
It depends on how you're doing it.
No,
because if you say,
no.
If I say it's not bad to discriminate, when people hear discriminate, you think of the historical examples of like the 1960s.
Let's try this again.
Discriminate all the time for various things.
Are there any acceptable circumstances where it is okay to discriminate on the basis of immutable characteristics?
Yes, 100%. Doctors
Would
do
you
it all
agree?
the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if I say, hey, I have a gynecologist, and the gynecologist is like, I'm an expert in looking at vaginas, and it's like, okay, I'm discriminating. All my patients are people with vaginas. That's an immutable characteristic. That's what discrimination is. The problem is discrimination is a dirty word, which is why it's
actually illegal
to say I'm only a gynecologist can only inspect vaginas.
So if a trans woman went to a gynecologist and was denied service,
trans women with a vagina.
Well, they don't have vaginas.
Well, yeah, it was like a plasty, like petite one, or like.
But that's still not a vagina.
Well, whatever it is, like if the gynecologist is able to assess the medical needs of that, then I think they should also do that. But
the issue where we're going with the Civil Rights Act is that one of the arguments we've seen from LGBTQ groups is the end of gender segregation, much like we saw the end of racial segregation. The argument they've been making for some time now is that we used to have white and black bathrooms, or I think it was white and colored, because colored could be not
Latino,
just, it could be any kind of mixed race or anything. And so the argument made by trans rights activists is that gender segregation, under the exact same law that banned racial segregation, there should be no men's and women's rooms.
Okay, wait, but let's take a step back. If you are against that, then you're for discrimination against an immutable characteristic, which is what I was saying is like, that's...
Yeah, I'm in favor of that.
Right, that's all I'm saying is like, the phrase, I'm in favor of discrimination means so many things, and people are going to attach so you want to be racist and not, hey, like, certain things are immutable. And
I wasn't asking about the discrimination as a gotcha or anything. I was asking like, we're trying to figure out how policy and law should be applied to people.
Okay.
Where do we all stand on the issue of choosing to discriminate based on immutable characteristics? The reason being, the law says you cannot.
Well, it totally depends on the context.
No. The law literally says you cannot.
No. Okay, look.
The 1964 Civil Rights Act.
Sure, and for years after that, we had affirmative action, which is discriminative on positive or negative discrimination based on an immutable characteristic, and you can be for or against that, but that was not illegal until the Supreme Court ruled on it recently, right? So,
the 1964 Civil Rights Act bars the discrimination based on race, sex, national origin,
when you say
religion.
Discrimination, that word means so many more things than just I am not allowing someone to do something because of their race, gender. Discrimination is something that you're like, I am distinguishing someone based on something, right? That could be a positive discrimination. That could be a negative discrimination. Like again, this is an example. If you want to hire a black person for a role to play a black person in a movie, that is positive discrimination. I'm saying, hey, everyone who's not black, you can't be here. But that's totally illegal, right? That's
actually, I do see what you're saying. I think legally that is excluded from discrimination.
Sure, but it is discrimination. That's what I'm saying. Maybe the word legally means something else, but discrimination just means I'm literally discriminating.
I understand what you're saying. For the purpose of what we're talking about if someone said, I'm going to hire a bartender, and then a white guy came and said, you get out of here, like we would say that's just racially discriminatory.
It's racial discrimination, based on race, right.
So I agree with you on the distinct semantics of the term.
Yeah.
I do not think that if a movie studio said, we have a character, he's a black man, and then a white guy showed up and be like, you don't fit, that's not discrimination.
That is, maybe colloquially people would say, well, that makes sense, but that is literally racial discrimination.
The role discriminated. The choice of actor
You're saying you're white, so you can't do this role, which is to play a black guy. That's racial discrimination.
My point being, the creation of the role was the creation of the discrimination.
Sure, and that is
not
also
the choice of
that
actor.
Specific kind of discrimination is okay, which is why I was hesitant to say, of course, there are discriminations that are okay. It's a very wide spectrum.
Yeah. I think we also have a big challenge. So like, here's a question for you guys. If one racial group is committing more violent crimes than another, then should police use that as a determinant factor in whether or not they would find someone suspicious?
No, I don't think so. I don't even think that you would need to take it that far. If police were simply allowed to do their jobs how any reasonable person would want them to, then we would see less crime and we would see more people in jail. The problem is, less crime might be acceptable, but more people in jail makes a lot of people very uncomfortable. Activist groups, media organizations, things of that nature. So that's why you have like predictive policing is very controversial, because AI will look at neighborhoods where crime is more likely to take place, finds out these neighborhoods maybe have a higher representation of minorities, and they say, well, we should probably police these neighborhoods a little bit more. That has nothing to do with the fact that the AI is, programmed to be wearing a Klan hood.
But that existed before AI too, right? Like these neighborhoods are already policed more because of the crime that is there, right?
Which should happen.
The problem is, one, you got to look at like, all right, which crimes are actually being followed up on? Like there's plenty of white collar crime that no one ever does. And if you look at like drug usage rate, even not white collar crime, it's pretty similar between races, but they do go into the communities where it's more of like a perceived problem there. And that might play into arrest statistics, that might play into incarcerations. Obviously they should go where the crime is. I think the problem is you're assuming that all the arrest data is this like infallible, like, oh yeah, like they're only arresting the people that are doing the crimes, and not like there are specific areas that are targeted and some would say over policed.
I think women shouldn't be allowed to be firefighters.
Even if you look at, I think it's.
I'm actually largely kidding. I think
for anything,
the average. So I mean, in terms of fighting fires, women, it's completely like, I'm actually joking. My point largely is we have these affirmative action policies that you end up with like a 5'5", 120-pound woman as a firefighter, which is just the stupidest thing imaginable.
Well, it depends. What's her job, right? Is she the person that has to go in and carry
fighting the fires? I'm saying.
Right. But like firefighting means a lot of things. Are you holding the hose? Are you chopping a door down? Are you carrying?
Doesn't matter.
Well, it does matter. It
doesn't.
Yeah. Because
at any moment, anyone responding to an emergency is going to have to be able to handle any one of these jobs.
Of 10 firefighters, and you've got 6 capable people of carrying a 300-pound obese man out of a
and there's 7 people,
and 4 of them can't. Like, I don't think that means this team is somehow less effective. Like, if these 4 people can do the jobs that are
agreed, fat men shouldn't be allowed to be firefighters either.
No, fat men shouldn't be allowed to be saved because it discriminates against women.
The problem is they lower the qualifications. So that women are able to
I
get
do
into
think
these
that's the logical conclusion of the left.
What? You think actually?
If they're choosing to hire 5'5" women to do fire rescue, and there's a morbidly obese man, they're like, women can't carry him.
Well,
that's his fault for discriminating.
I have a few friends that are like 5'5" Asian women with no muscles, and they actually do a pretty good job of being EMTs. However, obviously,
that's very different.
Stronger. Well, yes, but they do have to carry very fat people. Is what I'm saying. And what I'm saying is, look, if you have a team of firefighters and one of them is not capable of lifting the 300-pound man up, if you could show me that this was less effective overall, like this is causing all these fat people to burn to death because hey, this person can't carry him. Sure, okay, but it seems like there's a team of people. They all have different responsibilities. There's enough people that can do that heavy lifting thing. And if I don't think they should lower the requirements for people if everyone is actually legally required to be able to do that. But if it's like, hey, you're carrying the hose, or hey, like you're getting the ladder up, like who cares?
The issue tends to be, and the reason I bring it up is that what happens is the progressives will look at the outcome and then determine the system is sexist. So they'll say, hey, hold on. How come only 7% of the fire department in the city is female? They're clearly discriminating for some reason. They then look through it and they say the discrimination comes from the job requirements, which is you got to carry a 150-pound duffel bag over your shoulder through a simulated burning building, and women tend not to be able to do that. So we have to change the threshold so that it's fair for all people.
If that's what they're doing, I would disagree with that. I mean, like, yeah, if they're, it's like the Navy SEALs example always brings up, where it's like, why are there no women Navy SEALs? And it's like, well, if they can't fucking pass the test, most men can't pass that test, they shouldn't be Navy SEALs. You shouldn't lower the requirement for some arbitrary like equality of outcome thing. But if it's, hey, these women on this job as firefighters can do these jobs that they're allocated to, and this doesn't affect the performance, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I think the requirement to be a firefighter should be the first test is you got to open a pickle jar.
Do you have one?
You walk in and then they're like, you're applying for a job. Here's one pickle jar. And if you can't open it, get out.
Yeah, that's the problem. I agree. And I think any firefighter would agree too. If like, you're all there, you're a unit doing jobs. I don't care if this woman maybe doesn't like bench what I bench, but they do lower the requirements, whether it's for firefighters, police officers. You have one requirement for the men, one requirement for the women, taking into account things like lower strength levels, lower endurance levels, perhaps. And, if I were really sexist, I would say, I don't know if women even have the temperament to do these jobs. And maybe I would want to discriminate on that. But like, I'm more of an open-minded guy than that. But
you have to be not emotional to stop a fire.
I think in situations of high stress, there is a sort of consideration that maybe you wouldn't want. I mean, I've seen a lot of videos, for example, of women making arrests and they panic and they pull a taser and shoot a guy. And they go.
A lot of videos of guys doing that too, and they're like, "Oh my God, a black guy!" and they just unload a mag into him, and
That's
it's like
not what happens.
I've seen it happen. I think there's a lot. The idea that like women are like less temperamental is like, I don't know. We just saw like the 2 most powerful men in the world have a bitch fit on like the internet yesterday. Like, I don't know.
Again, you're comparing a situation where lives are on the line versus like 2 guys who are just like having a Twitter fight or whatever.
Hey, the big beautiful bill. Lives are on the line, I will say.
Okay, so
we don't have to deviate from
the point being, to achieve this outcome where we can have like an inclusive firefighting department or something does, as we see, require actually lowering those standards, which if people want fires to be fought properly, we can't have. And so
this has happened, right? Like you're saying they've already lowered the standards?
Yes.
Is there some phenomenon of like fires not getting put out the way they should be because of this? Like I've never heard of that, if that's the case.
I spent some time at a fire station, actually. My buddy's
That's
dad
not what I
was,
asked about your time
Well,
at the fire
what he's
station.
talking about is like this instance of where people just seem to be taking the job less seriously. Standards are being lowered. You have more accidents, things like that occurring. Guys are getting hurt. And I don't expect the media to necessarily pick up this story because it would be incompatible with this idea of, inclusivity. But
they just like lie.
Let's just be real. Like there's a trend of people putting up viral videos of female cops struggling to arrest like teenage guys.
Oh yeah,
and they're getting roasted for it.
Yeah, if they're incapable of doing the job because of their physical strength, I don't think they should have that job. And like, there are plenty of cops I've seen.
So there are examples.
Right, those are examples.
People tend not to like film
overweight,
viral fires. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah, but if there was some crazy phenomenon of fires not getting put out, and there's like, there'd be there's lots of videos of fire being put out. I would imagine you'd see one of like, some woman trying to hold the hose and she can't, and like sprays it out and the house burns down or something, right?
She's like this levitating.
Yeah, exactly. Like that you would see that happen as well. And like, yeah, if you can't meet the requirements of the job and you can see the detriment to that of like, hey, like a cop interactions are getting worse because women are so scared and they're just shooting them or something like that. Like, yeah, I would say you need to stop hiring people that aren't good at their job. The problem is I don't think this is like a female phenomenon.
Less dangerous because the technology with fighting fires has probably evolved to make it more automated than like with policing. So you can probably have weaker females operating these things and it's fine, point the hose. But if you've got them policing, they're an autonomous body against another autonomous body. It's like you say, I mean, you see these videos and they just are simply incapable of executing, where even a fat cop who's like a guy can use his mass sort of to his advantage.
Yeah, but the guy gets away.
Yeah. It depends on what, like,
I'm going to sit on
look at these examples of like, okay, this woman freaked out and shot a guy, and I'd probably agree, like, yeah, she's a bad cop, right? But if you're like, first of all, I come from a nice neighborhood, and it's like, okay, can a female cop stop a skateboarder from going into a place he's not supposed to be? Yeah, whatever. Like, this is very different from, what do you mean? Oh, you mean like physically, if like 3 teenage boys could probably overpower like
as a skateboarder who has hopped many a fence, ain't no way lady cop stopping me.
Sure, but like this is not going to turn into a physical interaction. This is going to be like, oh shit, the cops, like, let's get out of here, right?
Bro.
Like, they're just enforcing that.
So I have stories from my friends where they were like on a rooftop, and when the cops pulled up, because it was a company, they ran to the side of the building and jumped 10 feet to a telephone pole and climbed down and ran away.
Okay, right, but that would work against a fat cop or a guy cop who couldn't catch up with you either. My point is that if you're doing low-stakes crime stuff that's not involving a bunch of physical altercations, this isn't some reason to bar women from ever being cops. It depends on what the job is, and I 100% agree. If she can't do the job, like in these videos, then she shouldn't be a cop. But that goes for everyone, not just a woman.
There's a couple ways that people look at the political landscape. There's revolutionaries, there's moderates, reformers, there's accelerationists. I don't like the word accelerationist. There's got to be a word for where you just want to sit back and watch as liberals politically immolate themselves and just like roll with it. Conservatives don't like this because of their moral framework. They're like, it is bad that liberals enact things and do things that are detrimental. But as someone like me who I actually am more of a liberal guy, I can just look at liberals and be like, yeah, that's going to destroy your way of life and your society. But I quite frankly don't care because you'll cease to exist in 20 years anyway. So
what kind of liberal are you? Like in the Civil War movies, like what kind of American are you? What kind of liberal would you say?
Traditional.
What is that?
It's my
vibe from watching what I have, and I'll grant you this. I don't watch a lot of your show. I watch pieces, and I probably watch a lot of clips that are out of context. But like, it really seems like you mostly align with like right wing stuff, even if your morals don't. Right wing, like you voted for Trump in 2020, right?
So what does the vote of a person mean for your policies, your politics, and your
well, that you agree with the
is Tulsi Gabbard a liberal or conservative?
Right now, she's conservative. She used to be, insofar as
RFK Jr. liberal or conservative.
Well, hold on, let's talk about Tulsi Gabbard, right? Like, she had a very big right-wing shift. She was someone who was, what was it, in 2017? She was off fossil fuels, right? She was like a green person, like she was like more environmentalism. Now she's with a party that's promoting fossil fuels that doesn't do these green initiatives. So she is moved to the right. It's not as if the left shifted around her. Hold on.
But that's a question of fact, right?
Right. She is more right-wing now.
What I'm saying is like, you're asking about someone advocating for a fuel source.
Right.
So right is your argument that right and left don't define political philosophies?
A left-wing person is more likely to support some sort of Clean Energy Act. Tulsi Gabbard used to do that. She's no longer doing that. That is a shift to the right.
Question, right. So the question I'm asking you is, you define left and right not based on
policies.
It's not based on philosophies. It's based on fact, like worldview.
Based on the policies that they support.
Is RFK Jr. a liberal?
I think he was kind of like a crackpot, slightly environmentalist person, but he's never been like a prominent liberal Democrat, and now he's supporting the anti-vax crowd, I guess. So
I guess my question is, I'm trying to ask you, like, when how do you define liberal and conservative?
Yeah, based on the policies. So like progressive
so what
taxes,
policies am I for that are
environmentalism, like. Well, that's why I'm asking you. Like, I think if you vote for Trump, like, what policies of his do you support that are liberal policies?
Getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. No new wars.
Those aren't liberal policies. Getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. What do you mean?
Bill Clinton led the charge on waste, fraud, and abuse.
Saying that we should make something better is not the same as, hey, let's cut the entirety of the education department and the
Bill Clinton a liberal?
Bill Clinton is a liberal, but he would not do what I just described, which is what Trump is doing. So, like, this isn't the same thing.
Getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, cutting back on bloat.
You can say vaguely, I think we should make things more efficient. Probably everyone would agree with that. But when you see what it's borne out in the Trump administration, that's very different from what Bill Clinton did. Like, these are not the same things at all.
He did a lot more, yeah.
No, he didn't do a lot more. You can say he made things more efficient, but this is not the same thing as I cut the entire Department of Education. I'm cutting USAID. These aren't the same thing. You can't umbrella these as, oh, this is the same kind of policy, especially when the policy is so vague as I'm making something more efficient.
So traditional liberal, not classical liberal. Classical liberals like Locke and, they're more like libertarians.
Sure.
Traditional liberal as a political term tends to describe the Democrat view from the 90s, which was abortion, pro-choice, safe, legal, rare, secure borders, no illegal immigration, workers' rights, workers' protections, and cutting the size of government.
When you say no illegal immigration, like what do you mean? Like let's pick some of these. Like in the 1980s, right? Like Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, I think, are arguing about like illegal immigration. I think the question at this town hall for this debate was like, hey, what do we do for the kids of illegal immigrants? You can look up this video, and it's like they're kind of almost like out liberaling each other. One says like, look, I don't like the idea of illegal aliens in my country, but these kids are here, and I don't want to deprive them of this education. I don't want them to be seen as criminals. Like this is the Republican Party in the 80s saying, I support at least the
Republican Party up to like 2015 was for open borders.
Not open borders. That's a very different thing. These people are like, we need to secure our borders and we need to do something for these illegal people here, but I don't want to get rid of them.
Okay,
versus
point being,
you're describing well, hold on.
I'm not talking about the 80s. I said traditional liberal.
Right, but this is Republicans past the 90s, and you're saying you're a Democrat from the 90s. The Democrats were more liberal than the Republicans were in the 80s, but you're not. You're not there.
90s,
you're voting for the guy who says mass deportation now.
2008, Hillary Clinton called for a border wall.
Okay, that's.
I'm not talking about
having
the 80s.
A border wall is very different from, hey, let's deport every single illegal
Barack Obama was called the deporter-in-chief.
Yes, and he also did DACA. Like, do you support DACA?
No.
Why not?
Because you're an illegal immigrant.
Right, so isn't this...
And you're not
so
violent.
You don't support Democrats from 20 years ago?
No, I think it's like the idea that you would support literally everything everyone does all the time is a weird cultist mentality.
No, sure. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm saying your
so
politics
I am
align
a liberal,
with Trump today because Trump is a right-winger. He's not a liberal.
So Trump was called a moderate when he first ran.
Okay.
He is politically moderate to this day.
In what way?
Well, he got a lot of flack.
What is politically moderate about mass deportations? What is politically moderate about like?
Look at what other regimes have done to illegal aliens throughout history.
I'm talking about
like
America
Barack
today.
Obama was the deporter-in-chief.
He's not.
In fact, liberals right now
he did not advocate for mass deportations of every single illegal in the country. That's just
and
not
liberals
what his
right now are bragging about how Joe Biden deported more than Donald Trump is.
He did DACA. This is completely.
Did Joe Biden deport more than Donald Trump?
Probably, yeah. If you look at the statistics, but first of all, we're in the first 6 months. He's probably his idea is the platform that he ran on that you voted for. Did you vote in 2024 for Trump as well?
For Trump.
Yeah. He was, hey, let's get rid of every single illegal immigrant. That is not Obama's policy. That's not Joe Biden's policy. That's not liberalism from the 90s. It's not liberalism from the 2000s. Like,
you're isolating like a single point and saying that hereby determines.
Okay, well, let's move on to another point that calls you a liberal.
This is a cult. It's like.
Well, I'm just asking, what makes you a liberal?
I'm pro-choice. I'm pro-progressive tax.
But then you voted for Trump, who's trying to get rid of abortion everywhere. Like JD Vance said, I want to make it illegal nationwide. Right?
And Donald Trump got tremendous flack from the pro-life side, who were saying Trump is not pro-life.
In 2016, sure.
No, in 2024.
They said he's not pro-life enough?
Yes, okay. and they were saying don't vote for him.
Okay, and now the party that you voted for is attempting to... Well, okay, John, do you want abortion to be legal, like across the whole country?
Yeah.
I think it's a majority of the Republican Party is majority for illegal in all cases.
That's not actually.
You ever hear of a moderate?
No. So
I know what a moderate is. I'm saying that you're voting for the party that wants to make this. Well, because that's not a liberal position. You're voting for the people that want to get rid of abortion.
Voting is not a political philosophy. It's who you choose to best represent your views.
If you vote for Trump and then called yourself a progressive, I'd be like, in what way? And then you say, well, my views are all this, but I'm voting for the party which will materially make all these things the opposite of what I want. How are you a progressive?
Because my biggest priority is probably anti-intervention.
Okay.
I'm going to say it again. Y'all are a cult.
What was cultish about what I just said?
Like, you can't... So I'm a reformer, not a revolutionary. Okay. And I say this all the time because the left is a cult. Okay. That means Trump does bad things, and I go, yeah, well, I'm going to win here, 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 and here, and I'm a reformer, and I want those reforms more than I care about other things.
Okay.
That tends to be the average voter, largely on economics and immigration. The left is like, but how could you possibly vote for Trump if one thing is bad?
Well, it's not one thing. I'm asking which liberal policy has Trump implemented that is aligned with your supposed
anti-intervention?
liberalism? Okay, so
the neocons my whole life were pro-intervention and pro-war.
Yeah, Iraq War.
And I didn't vote for Trump in 2016, but he didn't start any wars, and he set timeline for withdrawal from
escalated the drone strikes from Obama and changed the
during a withdrawal, indeed. Right.
The withdrawal of...
The reason why Donald Trump escalated drone strikes was because we were pulling troops out of the Middle East.
Sure, but he killed more people in that area with drones and changed the reporting and changed the report. Well, okay, are you anti-interventionist because you are afraid of like the death and the destruction, or are you just like, oh, we shouldn't be located here?
Donald,
like I can be in America and I can send missiles into another country.
Donald Trump's policies in his first term, extending even to now, have been the gradual rescinding of U.S. military might in foreign entanglements.
I'd say mostly that checks out. Sure.
And that was the liberal position for 30 years of my entire life and every protest I ever attended. Mm-hmm. And now the Democrats are pro-war.
Pro-war?
Oh, come on. How much you want to give Ukraine?
That's not pro-war.
Do you want to give Ukraine?
Hold on, let me give an example. If I'm not like a pacifist, but I never in my life hope to ever kill anyone. However, if someone breaks into my house, I'll blow them away, right? If I'm not sure.
If someone invades the United States, I will join the military in 2 seconds.
Exactly, right? So like, it's not pro-war to say, hey, we don't want new wars to start. However, if Russia invades Ukraine, then we should give them like money or weapons to stop that from happening. That's like a defensive
pro-war.
measure. Why is that pro-war?
Because
the war didn't get started. It's not like America's like, go commit war.
Here, I love this. Let's try this. Gentlemen, a foreign nation 12,000 miles away has invaded one of their bordering neighbor states of 29 million people. We need to send special forces, military training, ATACMS missiles. We need to provide intelligence. We need to sink the flagship of their Black Sea fleet and make sure they win this war. And we're going to make sure American PMCs are on the ground aiding them. And I'm like, y'all are pro-war.
Why is that pro-war if we want to help an ally when a war was started by
Ukraine's not an ally. They're not an ally of ours. They've never been a formal ally of NATO or the United States.
Yeah, so they're not in NATO. That doesn't mean we don't support their common goals. That doesn't ally doesn't mean like officially we scribed it like on this.
What should we do if a nation we are not aligned with bombs our energy distribution lines?
Are you talking about the Nord Stream pipeline stuff?
I'm asking you a basic question.
If an enemy or a friendly nation does that?
I didn't say friendly nation.
If an enemy nation does it.
I didn't say enemy nation.
If just a nation did that.
If a nation bombed one of our distribution systems for our allies' energy, what should we do?
It depends on why they did it. Because if you're talking about
cut off our access to energy.
Yeah, so like the idea, this concept of like, I think the theory is that Ukraine did it to escalate our tensions with Russia so that we would support them more. Like that's the theory behind that, right? Like, and we should, if that's the case, that yeah.
I asked you a question about if a nation.
We both know what we're talking about,
Indeed,
right? We're
talking about the question, and then we'll carry on.
Yeah, if the case is that they did that, if that's what ended up happening, it's like, oh, okay, like this country tried to sabotage us to make us do something. That's probably a bad thing. We should punish.
And that's what Germany is accusing Ukraine of doing.
Germany's accusing Ukraine of the Nord Stream thing, right?
Germany has issued an arrest warrant for one Ukrainian who they said was accompanied by 2 other Ukrainians to bomb the Nord Stream pipeline for the purpose of cutting off NATO access to energy, so that Russia would stop getting the resources from Europe, which benefits them. I don't want to say the singular source funds the war, but it provides them with resources in war. So Ukraine attacked a NATO ally because they were trying to cause harm to Russia.
I don't know if we know this is fact, and this is...
That's fine. You know what? I don't care. I care. Our ally asserted it, and we should be aligned with NATO, not Ukraine.
If Germany asked us, hey, can you... First of all, Germany supports Ukraine, but if Germany said, hey, can you punish them for this, then I think that maybe we should listen to Germany if they did that. Well, the idea that we should pull out of Ukraine because of this
now you're pro-war, dude.
How is this pro-war?
We should not be involved in some other country's war.
Why not?
They're not an ally of ours.
But they literally are an ally.
No, they are not. That's fake news.
We helped them sign the agreement to give up their nuclear bombs.
That's a memorandum, not an alliance treaty.
Yeah, just because you legally didn't write the word ally down doesn't make it that, hey, we did not promise a security guarantee for you,
treaty alliance we do not have with Ukraine.
Are you saying that if we make a promise to
you're pro-war. You're pro-war. Bro, you are in favor of foreign war and our involvement in it. Yes or no?
I am in favor of defending a country that was attacked by another country if that country had security guarantees. Well, I know you're not.
You're pro-war.
Why is that pro-war?
Do you think the U.S. should be involved in Ukraine's war?
Yes.
Okay.
We gave them security guarantees.
The liberal position...
Wait, hold on. Let's talk about NATO. If Germany gets attacked by Russia tomorrow, do you think we should defend them?
Yes.
Okay, but are you pro-war?
If our alliance... is attacked by an enemy nation.
Yeah, we're going to send American troops. They're all going to get shot by the Russian troops. Is that pro-war? Because that's our guarantee that we'll go defend them.
It's not. Like, I don't know how y'all can't grasp this.
Why is that not pro-war?
Ukraine is not an ally of this country.
In what
nor
context?
are we being attacked. And I would also add, I am skeptical a bit on whether we should answer Article 5
for NATO. But the
for
point
NATO.
is, like, I'm not pro-war.
Depending on what Europe is doing right now. So let's just hammer out the nuances of this.
Okay.
5 years ago, if Russia bombed Germany, then yes, we should answer the call of NATO.
Is that pro-war?
No, it's not.
Why not?
The issue that I'm talking
It's a war that you support to defend our ally.
You support intervention. That is the nuance of the conversation. You guys are cultists.
Why is
you
that
can't
cultish?
because you can't understand
Can
nuance.
we take a step back?
You live in an isolated, one-dimensional reality.
Take a breather. I just want to ask like a really simple question. Like, I don't think I'm coming in here like with some crazy ideology. Now, you can say I'm wrong.
You are.
What? Hold on. You can say I'm wrong for 100%.
Neocon zealotry.
But when I see,
You're a
hey,
neocon.
a country that we signed an agreement with that said, hey, we'll protect you, so you can give up your nukes, so that you don't need them for protection, and then they get invaded, and we say, hey, we'll help you out. This isn't like some crazy concept to me. Now, if you can explain why that's a bad thing, I understand, but I don't think that makes me pro-war, right?
Yes, you're so when I say pro-war, I'm referring to what a traditional liberal is over the past 30 years, my whole life.
Liberals supported aiding people that we made promises to our whole life.
Okay, once again, you are a cult. You can't seem to grasp nuance. Everything's black and white.
No.
You can't understand that there is interventionary conflict, which I oppose, which had been the liberal position for 30 years, and we should not be intervening in Ukraine's domestic politics and their war.
Bill Clinton intervened in Kosovo. Was that pro-war?
Yes.
Why?
We should not be intervening in foreign conflicts in foreign countries.
So we should have let the Serbians genocide the Albanians.
I don't know or care.
Why not?
It's not United States.
You don't care about people dying?
I care about people dying when it's in our country and within our purview.
Yeah, but if we have someone that we can have some mutual beneficial relationship with and they say, hey, please stop them from genociding
Neocon,
us,
bro.
shouldn't we do it?
You are allowed to believe what you want to believe.
I just don't understand.
They make a movie, Team America, World Police.
You
just,
are
like,
you
making
are a
fun
neocon.
of exactly
No,
that.
what they're making fun of was the Iraq War.
If we went back to
World Police,
2006,
Is Bill Clinton
you
a
would
neocon?
be a neocon.
Is Bill Clinton a neocon?
If we went back to 2006, you would be
Bill
the
Clinton
neocon.
was in 92. Was Bill Clinton a neocon?
Neocons and
we went
neolibs
back
are
to
pretty
Answer
much the
my
same
question.
thing.
Bill Clinton is what I don't think is a neocon, intervened in Kosovo to save the Albanian people from a genocide. You call this interventionist? Is he a neocon?
When I call you, okay, this is because you guys live in a one-dimensional reality. You can't seem to
answer
grasp.
my question about Bill Clinton. How is he?
He's not a neocon.
Okay, but if
I think you
is that not
lack the understanding to which.
What am I lacking the understanding of? I'm looking at an intervention that I may or may not agree with and say, oh, this one makes sense because of a security guarantee that we gave them. Why is that pro-war? Is Bill Clinton pro-war?
I'm using the word pro-war to refer to your pro-intervention stance.
You're comparing it to what
I'm not an isolationist.
We would agree here. You don't like the George Bush Iraq invasion, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's not just interventional.
Nor Serbia, Kosovo, nor Desert Storm.
Hold on. One is
under
stopping
first
a genocide.
Bush.
One is our intelligence agencies.
stopping a genocide?
Bill Clinton stopped the genocide of the Albanian people in Kosovo using intervention, right?
Yeah,
That's very different from our intelligence agencies lied to us about weapons of mass destruction. So we went in and devastated this country and killed almost 1 million people, right? You and I are both against that. That is not anti-war because I'm against that. That is, I'm anti a shitty war.
I know it's hard for you to understand. And I don't know how to convey the idea to you that I don't believe the U.S. military should be an apparatus of the world police.
Okay.
Be it Serbia or otherwise, or Ukraine.
Why not?
I think that America should be responsible to the American people.
If
I don't
having
believe
a relationship
that the American
with a country by saving
you want me to answer
benefits
the question?
Well, hold on. If
you asked me a question, do I
and
answer
I'm
or not?
clarifying my question. If you get a beneficial relationship with a country by intervening and saving them from a genocide, isn't that good for America? That we now have influence there. Why not?
That's my point.
I don't think a single American troop died in the Kosovo.
The
thing.
American
it's not like
people
we're hurting.
should not be spending their labor on foreign incursions by a political class that rejects the will of the people.
Do you think the will of the people was don't help the people getting genocided in Albania? I don't understand this.
Trump won the popular vote.
Well, I'm talking.
Right?
Hold on.
Did
You can't
Trump
keep jumping
win?
around? Yes.
No.
Trump won
I don't give a
the popular vote,
shit about Serbia and Kosovo. I already said no. I don't. I was a little kid. I don't think you. How old are you?
I wasn't alive when
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's not argue about things we didn't exist in. Because if we want to go back to the 80s, we can talk about Ronald Reagan being for gun control. Okay.
Yeah,
And he was a
okay.
conservative, and the Republicans love him, and I think he was a scumbag.
Okay.
He was also in favor of
Agreed.
no-fault divorce. Going back and talking about how politics change is not the point being made here. The point being made here.
It is, because you say you're a liberal from 2002, and I'm saying none of your positions
Traditional
line up with these people.
liberal tends to refer to where the Democrats used to be.
But you don't line up with those people. You're
do,
literally anti-Bill
anti-intervention.
Clinton from the 90s, which was the liberals in the 90s. So even further back.
I know this is hard for you to understand, but saying
how
the
is-
same thing over and over again doesn't change what I said.
Because you're not acknowledging what I'm saying. You're not a liberal from the 90s. You're not a liberal from the 2000s. You don't support DACA. So, like, how are you a liberal from any of these eras? Just, like, why not just say, I like Trump's policies because Trump is on the right and that's who I support? Like, what's wrong with
I
that?
think like I said this earlier, one of the biggest divides between the left and the right is that the left is retarded and the right is slightly
I
less
saw you tweet
retarded.
that this morning. Because the Bryan Cranston
Because,
scene
like-
fell for your bait, right?
Because you can't seem to grasp that I was 13 years old when the U.S. began their interventionist neocon policies.
In 2003.
And that is what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And then when you start talking about a bygone era to which I didn't exist in politically, nor you, it's immaterial.
I
the
talked
positions
about
we're
Obama.
taking
You
right
were alive
now.
for Obama. You're disagreeing
And
with Obama's
disagreeing with
policies.
one policy.
Which policies do you support?
Doesn't make you a conservative.
Which
I'm in
policies did you
favor of
support?
universal basic health care. I'm
Okay.
pro-choice.
But then
and
why vote for
anti-war.
Trump?
Because what
He's
am I
not for any of those things.
Do you think that I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris?
If she's closer
I'm
to
a
those policies
reformer,
than
not a
he is.
revolutionary. I get a
Me
withdrawal
too.
from the Middle East if I vote for Donald Trump.
I want to reform the left-wing party from what I don't like they're doing. But
By voting for what?
Are you going to vote for Trump and reform him to become pro-choice, become immigration in the way that you want? Like, is this really what's happening? If are you changing the Republican Party to be more left?
Is Trump pro-war or anti-war?
It depends on what you mean. He didn't
Trump-
start any new wars, but like I said, he escalated drone strikes.
Oh, wait,
He's talking
say that
about
one more time. Say that one more
he's
time.
talking
Say
about
it again.
invading Greenland. He struck Soleimani, which might have caused a war with Iran, which might still happen.
No new
Now people
wars?
are-
No new wars?
in
Did you
his
say
first term, yeah.
You say no new wars? Oh my God. That means I have a choice between the Democratic establishment pro-war.
Joe Biden
and,
start a new war? I actually don't know.
yes, Ukraine. And he got us involved in
Started
it.
Ukraine? Not
Joe
Russia
Biden
inviting
started
him?
the U.S. involvement in the Ukraine conflict. Yes, he
didn't
did.
start the war.
Agreed. Joe Biden got the U.S. involved in a foreign entanglement in Eastern Europe. It's fucking nuts.
So you're like not just no new starting wars, no new involving ourselves with any country's politics that are at war.
I'm not going to speak in absolutes. My point is this. I am not a revolutionary. You live in a cult world where it's black or white. I am saying that the
so much
mathematic
nuance here.
proposition of the last election is Donald Trump gets me closer to what I like with RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard. And so I say
Can you
I'll vote
name some things that you're
RFK
getting closer
Jr.?
to. Yeah, what are you getting closer to with
banning
RFK Jr.?
artificial dyes in food.
Okay, that's a very actually I agree
Very
with that
specific
policy.
thing that I'm
that's
very
a very
much a fan
specific
of.
thing. But like,
And
what is he
other
getting you closer
environmental
to on
chemicals?
other? What environmental things has he proposed? Like what clean energy? What
RFK
like,
Jr.
You say aren't you pro Green New Deal, right? Or no? Did you say that at some point?
I was pro Green New Deal when the policy was we're going to build roads and bridges, not when it was we're going to racially discriminate against people in colleges.
Okay, maybe
That's
I
what
didn't see that part of the Green New
AOC's
Deal.
Green New Deal was.
I think I might have seen there was some DEI stuff in there.
Right.
That's what you're talking
So
about.
when AOC came out and said, we want a government program that reinvests in roads, bridges,
Mm-hmm.
and we want to focus on environmentally sound practices, I said, this sounds fantastic.
Okay.
And I made a video saying this is a good idea.
Yeah,
It's
okay,
going
I
to bring
remember
back
that
a bunch of middle-class jobs.
Right.
It's going to strengthen construction companies, and it's going to fix our crumbling infrastructure. And then she released a resolution that said in hospitals, in universities, and in other hiring practices, race should be the preference.
Right. So what's gets you
like,
closer
what?
to that? Because my policy is I might
hate all
disagree
of
with
that.
some
It's
of
evil.
those things, and I'm going to be in that party telling them, hey, you got to nix X, Y, and Z to get us closer to that original thing you had. But you're voting for the complete opposite party who's nowhere close to that.
Trump didn't start any wars.
Green New Deal.
Obama
Let's stick
started
on this.
7.
What environmental policy is Trump getting you closer to, right? Like, and the no new wars thing, again, Biden didn't start one.
I didn't say I voted for Donald Trump for the Green New Deal.
What did you vote for him for then? That's what I'm asking. You're saying he's getting
the
you closer
less
to the things
war
you
candidate.
want. Helping out Ukraine is not us starting a new war.
Obama started 7.
Started 7 wars? I think Syria, I know that one. What are the other ones?
Yeah, wow, amazing. He got us involved in Syria without congressional approval nor notifying the public.
Sure, and you can
we
be-
only found out after we were already in Syria for like 2 years.
Right, and you can be upset about that. But again, how does voting for Trump get you closer to this? I just don't understand this. Like, I really don't.
Right, because the left is a cult. If I have to choose, we can call it whatever we want. Did Donald Trump start any wars?
In his first term, he did not start a new war.
He
Yes,
did not.
famously, right. Yeah.
Famously, he did not.
Right.
I'm going to vote for that every day of the week.
But do you support him, like, drone striking Soleimani?
That's a coin toss. It's tough.
But like, I don't know whether or not it's good. I'm like, oh,
Sure,
maybe
I
we
agree.
needed to do this, right? However, that absolutely could have started a new war, and it might end up being a part of the reason we go to war with Iran. Like,
It's a really great point made by Sebastian Gorka when I talked to him recently, is that the biggest concern that we have is we don't intervene with boots on the ground in foreign countries. However, when it comes,
Biden do that.
we have special forces on the ground in Ukraine.
Well, they're
and
not fighting, right? They're like instructing people, right?
Look, I'm not gonna. This is such a psychotic. Listen,
Isn't that different?
do you if I hand John a gun and tell him to shoot you, who killed you?
John.
And would I go to prison?
Yes.
Indeed.
Right, but
so when
are
the
you saying,
United
like,
States
we
provides
fought in World War II when we gave guns to the British, like this isn't us fighting
that's
in
what
the
got us
war. We were
involved.
aiding an ally then, and then we got involved when. Well, oh, you're saying that's why the Japanese bombed us, or
there's several reasons why the Japanese bombed us. One of which was we were supplying their enemies with weapons.
Sure.
Then
So you're saying it's semantic to say we're not fighting the war because we're not shooting at them. We're giving them all the tools to do it.
We have American special forces on the ground providing
like instructing
logistical support,
them.
instructing. We have trainers in Poland training their troops. We have U.S. citizen PMCs on the ground pulling the trigger and shooting guns. And it was
okay. So
private military contractors.
Volunteers or private PMCs are.
We call
not
them.
part
It's funny how the media calls them volunteers when they're paid to be there, but sure.
Well, I know there are volunteers in Ukraine. They probably get paid by the military. But you're also talking about something like Blackwater, right? Like an a private company is there.
What do they
fighting on behalf
call
of
themselves
Ukraine.
now? They change their name every year or something.
Yeah, because they got to.
I don't know that they're actually there. The volunteers that are fighting there are paid individual private military contractors to fight.
That's not the American military. That's
they're American,
right?
They're American veterans. Money to pull the trigger.
If I go and do that, right, I'm not an American veteran. I wouldn't say that America's on the ground. It's just an American citizen, right?
If I give John $100, a gun, and say, shoot you, will I go to jail?
Yes.
Indeed. And where did that money come from?
Came from you.
Okay, so like,
but you're not fighting in the war. You
don't-
didn't commit a violent action against me. You just contracted me to be killed.
It's ridiculous semantics to be like, well, American citizens are there fighting, and they are paid by the American government to be there.
Not the military. The American military is not declared war on Russia.
The American government's not really involved because they're only paying the guys, but the guys chose to be there of their own volition.
I think the way to put it would be if you were in support of us fighting, and then you're like, dude, Tim, it'd be so funny if you like gave John a gun right now, and then he does, and then I kill this guy, and then you're like, but I'm not pro-killing.
Well, the analogy is like, hey, John, I'm going to protect you for the rest of your life if you give up your gun, and then he comes at you, and I say, oh shit, I did make a promise. Here's a gun. I said I would do it. Like, this is not the same as America
fighting. We can just simplify it completely and be like, Democrats want foreign entanglement. I don't.
True.
Do you ever question like? If Russia gave you tens of millions of dollars because they thought, and I think you were tricked by these people, right?
That story's fake.
Well, hold
on. That story's not true. It never happened.
The Edward Gregorian thing, right? Like
yes,
they
not real.
tried
Never
to
happened.
You. It never happened?
Never happened.
They never tried to host your.
No, you guys believe fake cult bullshit because you live in
this is from the DOJ. Maybe I should.
They dropped it.
They dropped it.
There's no evidence. No evidence was ever released, and there's no case.
They dropped the case completely.
The two people that I can't. I'm not going to speak out of turn. I will just say this: the case is dropped.
Turn if the case is dropped, right? Like
I'm not going to.
Now, right?
How about you let me finish talking?
Well,
like, what are you doing?
I'm just asking if this is all fake.
The case is dropped.
Okay.
There's no evidence.
Why can't you talk about it?
I'm talking about it right now.
But you said I'm not going to speak out of turn. Like
beyond what I can say, I will not speak out of turn for other people.
Okay.
What I can say is there's no case. There's no evidence. As far as anyone can tell, it never happened, and it was dropped almost immediately the day they announced it.
It was dropped immediately.
Almost immediately after they announced it, the case was gone.
I don't know if you have a Jamie. Can we pull it up? Because I want to.
Pull what up?
Pull the fact that the case was dropped.
How do you do that?
How do you know it was dropped?
Because I have lawyers that were working with the DOJ on it.
That wasn't reported anywhere. Not a single person.
Yes, indeed. Because the story wasn't real to begin with, and it was picked up by a bunch of fucking retards.
Made it up.
The DOJ
made it. What was it?
I will tell you this.
DOJ made it up to go after you.
I didn't say that.
Well, yeah, but who's making? If it's completely fake, where did it come from?
That's an interesting fucking question, isn't it?
Yes. Because my understanding was, I think you were deceived. I watched your response to it.
What's your evidence any of it happened?
I don't. The DOJ report. That's all I have.
What DOJ report?
The DOJ PDF that they released with all the different names. It said that Russia was trying to pay people through Tenet Media Company, funneling money to host your content. Culture. This show, by the way.
What's the evidence?
I don't have the fucking links in it.
There was never any evidence.
Okay, so where did it come from? What do you mean? I'm confused. Look, all I'm saying is the story was, and if this is false, sure. The story was the Russian government thought it behooved them to pay you money because your talking points on Ukraine were indistinguishable from their propaganda. Now, if that's not true, maybe.
It's not true. That's not even in the indictment.
When you scream Ukraine is the enemy of the people, that is essentially Russian propaganda. No, I don't think you're being paid for them.
Did our ally Germany accuse Ukrainians of sabotaging our energy pipeline?
Did our ally Germany put money into that country to fight back against it? Is Germany not raising money for them right now?
You gave a specific quote when I said Ukraine is an enemy of this country.
What did you mean by that?
Because Germany, our ally, said that Ukrainians just bombed our energy pipeline. And I said that makes them an enemy of us. Our ally was attacked by Ukrainians.
Okay, so clearly the governments of these NATO countries don't agree with you insofar as they think, hey, it still behooves us to give money to this country and help it defend itself against Russia.
I don't care about that.
Meanwhile, the Russian narrative is 100% that did happen in that way that you're describing, where we don't actually know. This is my understanding. My question is, why should I take your Ukrainian facts seriously if this seems to be the case? What?
It's CBS News.
What's CBS News?
What I just cited was CBS.
They said 100% this is confirmed, or this is an alleged thing?
CBS reported that Germany has issued an arrest warrant for a Ukrainian diver named Volodymyr Z.
And that means 100% it happened?
It means our ally has asserted that this is their stance on it, and we should stand with our NATO ally.
Why is it their conclusion Ukraine is the enemy of the people?
Maybe it is.
Well, no, it's not. They're giving them money. They're supporting them.
That doesn't get into the nuance of a political climate in Eastern Europe.
Okay, so what I'm asking you is, your position on this seems to be at the least aligned with a lot of what the Russian position is, which is, fine,
that Russians are scumbags and should have invaded?
If that's your opinion, and what I'm saying is, why then are all these countries still doing the exact opposite of what you're suggesting?
What does that have to do with what we were talking about? It
has to do with the fact that, I'm asking you, why should I take any of your opinions on this seriously when it seems to be 100% aligned with a country that is the enemy in this situation?
Are you retarded?
What?
Are you a retard?
I mean, yes, but that's irrelevant to
what does my opinion as an American who doesn't want to be involved in foreign wars have to do with whether Russia agrees with that or not?
Because if the Russians thought that they should give you millions of dollars to spread your opinion, which helps them out...
And they didn't, and that's made up.
Can we look at that? What was the case being dropped? Like, do you have an email from your lawyer about it being dropped or something that you're allowed to show with, like,
is there any proof that it ever happened?
The proof, look, if you think the DOJ made it up out of thin air, maybe. I don't know.
Okay, let's try this. Do you believe everything the government says?
No.
And with no evidence being issued, no case ever being brought, no individuals ever identified,
with charges. I mean, okay, with the two Russians,
you just believe whatever the government says.
To the two Russians indicted, are they free? Are they free now?
Who are they?
Kalishnikov and the other one. I don't remember the other name.
When have you ever seen them before?
Are you saying these people aren't real?
We don't know that they are.
I'm asking you if you...
They haven't even posted photos of these people.
So, okay, hold on. Let me just get this straight. Because the idea is this entire thing was crafted out of thin air. We made up fake names.
Why'd they drop
directly with XYZ people. It's directly linked to this company that we know is real, which is Tenet Media, started by Lauren Chen and her husband or whatever. But everything in between those names is completely fabricated.
So you believe whatever the government tells you?
That's not what I asked. I asked you if everything is completely fabricated in between those names.
Just because they issued an indictment doesn't mean that they made it up. They could be wrong.
Well, what is the source that is wrong then, right? Like, are all these Russian... Because you just alleged these Russian people don't exist.
Here's the world that you live in. You live in a world where if the government asserts it, it must be true without charge or trial or
not what
evidence.
I said. I said if someone says something
with a
very credible report...
You're using that to strike at my opinion on a war in Ukraine, which I think we shouldn't be involved in.
It's because I'm questioning the veracity of some of the facts you're bringing up on it because they are indeed aligned with Russian state propaganda.
Let's try this.
Okay, let's try this.
Let's try the second biggest live show in the country is contacted by a conservative personality to license a cultural debate show unrelated to the news.
Sure.
The DOJ then comes out shortly before the election and claims that Russia paid for the whole thing.
Yes.
And then within weeks, it's completely gone. No evidence released, no charges, no trial, no evidence.
Were the Russians not, charged? I thought they were.
I'm saying outside the indictment.
I don't think you committed a crime. I read the report. I watched your response, and it's like they deceived you to funnel money into you because they thought that your opinions aligned with theirs, and they want to spread those. That's it. That's all it looked like.
I think you're a retard.
Why?
Because when the U.S. government, largely under the Biden administration, wants to be involved in a foreign conflict, and the second biggest live stream in the country is saying we should not be, they then issue a statement without evidence, impugning my honor that you are using to strike at my credibility.
Do you have evidence that the Biden government fabricated this to frame you because they hate your opinions on Ukraine? What?
I didn't say they did.
Well, that's what you're alleging right now.
No, I'm alleging that they...
You just said that. What do you mean? You just said when someone says something against the motives of the Biden administration, they might go after that second biggest podcast because they don't like what that podcast is saying. You said that's what they did, right?
My point was that you are using a claim without evidence to impugn my credibility.
No, I'm actually not.
You literally just said, why should I listen to your opinions
I'm using
on this?
because your opinions are indistinguishable from Russian state propaganda, and it behooved them to give you money because they're like, I want these opinions disseminated more.
The Russian position is that they shouldn't have invaded Ukraine?
So that's your basic position? I'm talking
From day
about
one.
Ukraine is the enemy of the people. America is fighting this
Never
war.
said they were enemy of the people.
You literally said Ukraine is the enemy of this country or whatever,
Because
right?
they bombed the Nord Stream pipeline, according to Germany.
The point is that
Bro, you know
positions
so little about the Ukrainian conflict.
What do you mean?
That you like.
Are you going to get me to name all the oblasts right now? I know like one of them. So
You don't. Oh, wow, I'm impressed. You don't know.
it's like
you
Donetsk
don't
and
know, you know what,
Luhansk or whatever. Those are the only two.
You don't even know two.
Are they dumb if pronouncing them wrong?
Luhansk and Donetsk.
Yeah, there we go.
I don't care if you know the names of oblasts.
I just
because
remember you
the point
called
is,
out Wick on that. So
you don't know shit about what's going on, but you are adamant we be involved.
what do you mean I don't know shit? I know that the security guarantee happened. I know that we should defend.
Why did
an
Russia
ally.
invade?
Why did Russia invade? Well, I think you're alleging that it was because of the trade deals and they didn't want their cheap European goods flooding into Russia or something like that. I thought you said that at one point. I'm sorry if that's not what you think. I thought the Russia.
I read that in a Reuters article.
Okay. So what do you think? Why do you think Russia invaded?
Because they don't want to lose control of Sevastopol.
Okay.
That's why they control the land bridge into Crimea.
What does this have to do with anything I said? I've seen you talk about this
You
stuff.
don't know why the U.S. is involved in Ukraine, but you want us to be there.
I think that the U.S. is opposing, the invasion of Ukraine because we promised that, hey, if you give up your nukes, we'll help you if you get invaded because we don't want the nuclear proliferation in this country.
And what was that called?
I don't remember. It's like 1993 or something, right?
Listen, I have an issue with ill-informed individuals advocating for an escalation of war.
Why is this... Dude, if you're talking about, look, I can probably name like the way that you've described of Russia's goals in this country and like all the points you're going over. My question is, why is it that when we do a security guarantee for a country, we shouldn't help that country out?
What's the security guarantee?
The security guarantee is that if you give up your nukes, we will protect you, right?
Tell me about it.
What, do you want me to pull it up? I don't have it memorized. Do you have it memorized?
Yeah, it was the Budapest Memorandum.
There we go. Didn't remember.
It was the nuclear deproliferation, the beginning of the START treaties.
Right.
Now, why is the United States involved in Ukraine?
Because why are we involved in any foreign country?
No, there's a specific reason we're involved in Ukraine.
Are you talking about like to combat the spread of Soviet stuff, or what do you mean?
I have an issue my whole life with ill-informed people propagandized by the government to advocate for foreign intervention in other countries.
Why is this? What am I propaganda? Like, tell me what my
you don't
brainwashed
know
position. Because in good faith, I'm asking you, what do you think my position? Why I support this based on this like thing? Like, if I said, oh, it seems like we promised this country we'd defend them,
we'll be greeted as liberators.
Huh?
Because you're basically saying we will be greeted as liberators.
No, I'm saying seems to me like we had a promise to this country to defend them in this case. My question is, what's wrong with that? Because maybe I'm wrong, but tell me about it. But my question originally was going back to this, like, okay, but like if you're saying the same things as Russian state TV, it makes it hard to take you seriously.
Does the does the treaty that we have with Ukraine that promises to defend them include any guarantees for Russia?
Probably, I think so, right?
Does it maybe is there maybe some kind of issue pertaining to if the U.S. aggresses?
Just tell me. I haven't read the whole thing.
Yeah,
since,
like
3 months ago or something.
Was it Timber Sycamore? Was that the operation?
That was in Syria.
Yeah, when the U.S. started providing weapons to Islamic terrorist groups.
Yeah.
So that they could topple the Assad regime, which was allied with Russia, where Russia has their naval base in Tartus.
Okay.
That was an aggress upon an ally of Russia, which destabilized the region.
Okay.
Creating a conflict, particularly around control of a Russian naval base, which put them at risk.
Okay.
Assad had to flee the country. We viewed him largely as a terrorist who was gassing his own people.
Right.
Russia viewed him as an ally and sought to protect him.
Okay.
The U.S. threatened to put a no-fly zone over Syria, to which Hillary Clinton said, let's do it, even though she was warned that would start war with Russia directly. She said, I don't care.
Okay.
The reason we are in Ukraine largely has to do with our attempts to bring natural gas from the Middle East into Europe to offset Russia's control of natural gas.
Right, yeah, I've seen you talk about this. Okay.
So the U.S. is setting up operations in Ukraine,
okay,
running soft power operations to shift their government towards a pro-EU, pro-Schengen, pro-NATO sentiment.
Okay.
Russia opposes this.
Okay.
This is why Russia invaded. Firstly, the reason why they seized Crimea in 2014, was because they saw the writing on the wall with the ousting of Yanukovych. They didn't invade Ukraine at the time. They simply had their existing troops in Sevastopol walk outside, and then
they put a bunch of special forces and like
they were already
the elections.
there.
No, the little green men thing, right?
They were already there.
Okay,
they have a
why
naval
does that
base
make
in
it
Sevastopol.
okay?
No one said it was. I'm saying this is what Russia did.
Right. Then there was
Russia
there was
invaded
a
Ukraine
in
after Joe
right?
Biden got back in.
Right.
Because when Trump won in 2016, all of these tensions simmered down and halted. The response from the left, the Democratic Party, was largely that Donald Trump was supporting Russian interests
One more time.
by removing our involvement from Ukraine.
I asked what specifically about my position is completely fabricated or brainwashed,
because you
don't
I'm
know also
any of this, but
I'm
want us
also
to be
hold
involved.
on, but I'm also questioning everything you're telling me now because first of all, you have been in this industry way longer than me. I would always concede and cop to the fact that you probably know more about more things than I do, and probably ever will.
Not only do I know more about it than you, I was there twice at the start of the Civil War.
But my question is, if the Russian state media says, "Hey, this person's opinions are so aligned with ours, we want to give them millions of dollars," why should I believe you?
That's made up.
And your evidence of it being made up is, well,
you have no evidence of it.
Yeah, but you're if you think the DOJ completely fabricated it, just say that. But I don't think that's the case.
Let's say their indictment is fine.
Okay.
What evidence did they release?
I don't know. I haven't looked at the sources.
The indictment
at the
contains
bottom.
no
What do you
evidence.
mean? It's like, can we like call Lauren Chen on the phone and ask her right now?
The indictment contains zero evidence that anything that they've claimed happened.
Yeah, when the government releases a report on something, do they have like a list of sources at the bottom, or do they say this is what we're alleging happened? Like, Joe Biden said, hey, Russia's about to invade Ukraine in the coming weeks, and they didn't say, and these are intelligence sources, and these are our spies. They were just like, this is going to happen, and then it did, right?
If your only argument against the historical facts that I brought up is, but I heard from an indictment that you may have been paid by a foreign country.
That's not my only argument. I have a lot of arguments there. I don't want to get into a whole Ukraine debate. My point is, like, I don't understand why.
Let's just pause on the Ukraine thing because I don't need to rehash a history lesson to somebody who didn't research it.
Okay.
Let's just talk about
not researching. Can we talk about the fine people hoax? You talked about it with Adam Conover, and like I think you bring that up with liberals a lot. I just made a video on it. You feature in it, the Adam Conover clip itself.
Right.
And the idea
you did research it. And you did know the full quote.
Yeah. So some people, especially Chuck Schumer, he did this. He said Donald Trump called neo-Nazis fine people, which is not the quote, right? It's like
they should be condemned.
Yeah, fine people on both sides, but I'm not talking about this. But like I think that completely ignores the context of the white nationalist who organized the rally, who was there on that day, and all the Identity Europa, the KKK, like the idea that there were fine people in this group is kind of like what everyone was upset about, is that he didn't condemn them on August 12th when white nationalists killed a guy. 2 days later, he gave a teleprompter speech that seemed kind of like wooden and hollow. And then on the 15th, he finally said the fine people thing, pointing to no one, because there were not fine people on the side of the neo-Nazis.
I think
right?
this is why young men are leaving the Democratic Party.
Because we don't like neo-Nazis?
Because Trump condemned neo-Nazis, and you're trying to make the case why he actually did.
Can you bring up the Snopes article that you brought up?
Where Trump said, not the Nazis, and...
Well, here's the thing, is like, if you look at that article, obviously, Snopes did a good job. They're like, we are here to report on the factual thing of what Trump said.
Yep.
But you brought this up with Adam Conover. Scroll down. Can you read that editor's note?
Some readers have raised the objection that this fact check appears to assume Trump was correct in saying there were very fine people on both sides of the Charlottesville incident. That's not the case. The fact check aimed to confirm that Trump actually said, not whether what he said was true or false. For the record, virtually every source that covered the Unite the Right debacle concluded that it was conceived of, led by, and attended by white supremacists. And therefore, Trump's characterization was wrong.
Right. So, like, most of the people and the media narrative around this as a whole was that Trump is not condemning white nationalists at this rally that killed a person.
I'm just going to say it again. This is why young men are leaving the Democratic Party.
Can you address the point I'm bringing up?
Hey,
August 11th happened.
I'll say it right now. Who did Trump describe specifically as the fine people?
So, on August 11th...
Who did Trump describe as the fine people he was referring to?
He said the people that weren't the neo-Nazis and the racists who should
No, he specifically said some people who just didn't want to see statues torn down in their neighborhood.
So not those people. So everyone excluding those. And
so when Trump
Snopes
says, like, a little old lady doesn't want a statue torn down as a fine person,
but that's
right.
Where is this little old lady, right? The point is, this was a white nationalist rally organized by Jason Kessler, a white nationalist, and with the scheduled speakers being David Duke, Mike Enoch, Richard Spencer. And so when you show up, you look at these promotional materials, the news,
and they should be condemned totally.
And the news reports on this as this is going to be a white nationalist rally, and then you show up and you're like, well, I know I'm one of the 4,000 other Nazi people here, but I'm just here to protest the statue. Do you think those people like existed and like this is specifically this one or two people?
They did, actually. And it's also, if you look at like the history of how these organizations operate throughout American politics, it's exactly like you're describing, where you've got something like a statue for Robert E. Lee. You've got Americans who are local and they're like, you know what, this is my heritage. Maybe I don't swear by it, but I like it and I respect it. And they all of of a sudden can bring in these boogeyman figures like David Duke, who famously sold lists of his members to the SPLC.
Why do you say boogeyman for David Duke?
Because that is what they are.
The Grand Wizard of the KKK.
The boogeyman referring to this sort of like archetypal scary thing so that the media can then report on it. And now 8 years later, we're pretending that Trump is maybe a white supremacist.
The media didn't bring David Duke to the rally. David Duke promoted and organized Jason Kessler.
There is a relationship between the state, the media, and the boogeyman that seeks to take normal right-wing opinions and vilify them and make them scary and alienating to normal people.
So you think there's some subversion tactic which made the white nationalists promote this rally to scare people away from defending the statue?
100%. Yes, that is how this has operated since the end of World War II, this relationship between the national security state, far-right organizations, and the media. They all work together to vilify normal right-wing opinions such as, we don't want a statue of a local hero.
I got a question for you. Do you think that intelligence agencies in the United States coordinate with news organizations?
100%, yes, of course. And I mean, even worse than that, they subvert certain movements. Like I brought up COINTELPRO, right?
Do you think that news organizations, even today, take direction from intelligence agencies?
Direction? Depends on what you mean by that. I'm not sure. Like they could
get
be
a
if the
phone
FBI is like, you have to report on this. Maybe if it's like, hey, we're doing a story on this and we have insiders here. Would you like to make a story about this? That might be manufactured consent, but yeah, they probably do that.
So I can tell you with firsthand experience, the State Department particularly calls on the phone the editor-in-chief and tells them what to report.
They say, hey, you need to report on this, or hey, this is what happened if you're making a report on this.
They say, we need you to report on this.
Sure, but that's not forcing them to report on something. If I, bombed a country and then I'm like, hey, we're going to report that we just bombed Cambodia or whatever, and I get on the phone with Washington Post, I'm like, hey, just so you know, we just bombed a country. We're leaking it to you first. Go ahead and,
No, I'm telling you that the State Department contacts the heads of news organizations and says, we've got a big story that we need you to cover. We need this one out there.
Sure, but like this is kind of the way you're phrasing it makes it seem like, oh, news, like you got to do this or we're going to punish you, and not, hey, you're a news organization. This is going to be a huge benefit for you to get ahead of this story and talk about this very big thing that's about to happen, which is a completely normal relationship.
So I think because of movies largely, people live in this world where they think everything's a perverse incentive or blackmail or a bribe. The reality is for news organizations, it's really simple. You just hire the people who will do what you say. You don't hire the people who you have to bribe to do.
Yeah, Noam Chomsky made a whole thing about this.
So what ends up happening is you're a news organization, and you want someone who's you need to report that this conflict in Afghanistan has to happen, and the Taliban are the bad guys.
Oh, if you want to talk about how the media was very complicit in the Iraq War narrative, 100%.
So what you do is. You get a list of people who are writing, and one guy says, I'm a bit nuanced, I'll write whatever you need. One guy says, I hate the government of Iraq. Saddam Hussein is a scumbag. You're hired. Then when the State Department says, write this, they go, hey, look what we got from the State Department. He goes, oh, yeah, and he writes it up.
Yeah, there's ideological capture for sure. I don't disagree with that.
Well, it's functional of the U.S. intelligence.
Okay, but if we're talking about this, and it's like, okay, if we look at the timeline, you had a bunch of neo-Nazis on August 11th go and talk about Jews not replacing us, blood and soil, gas the K word, right? And it's like the day after that, he doesn't condemn those people versus every other Republican politician coming out.
He did.
No, the day after that, he doesn't condemn those people, right? He says, he tweets something out.
So stupid.
Well,
this is why young men are leaving the Democratic Party.
You can keep deferring to that, but the point is, like, your narrative on this is painted by what I will admit are people like Adam Conover who like don't understand it. They just hear this like, oh, he called neo-Nazis fine people, and they brush it aside. They don't think about it. Did Adam Conover lie about it?
Because the first thing he said was,
and then he said, I don't know anything about it.
Then claimed he didn't know.
Right, which is like pussy shit, in my opinion. But the point is,
and now what you're doing is called sophistry.
What is the sophistry to say that people were upset? You can look at the articles from this time.
Tone about things that happened 8 years
ago. You are arguing
the day after neo-Nazis
Trump instead of what actually happened.
The day after neo-Nazis marched in this rally with the tiki torches, Republicans came out. Mitch McConnell, the Bushes, all these other people came out and said, by the way, I'm not saying these people are good. I'm saying all the other Republican parties said, hey, these are neo-Nazis and these are bad. And Donald Trump said, many sides, right? And people were upset about that. And
you mean after a different event?
No, that's why I call it sophistry. No, after the tiki torches.
Trump didn't say very fine people on both sides of the tiki torches.
The many sides was on August 12th. He said many sides. Fine people was on August 15th. That was 3 days later, after he didn't say anything to condemn them for 2 days. Then gave the teleprompter speech. Then finally condemned them after every other reasonable politician who I fucking hate Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz was condemning this and he wasn't. And it seems like the reason people are mad are not that he said verbatim, neo-Nazis are fine people, because he didn't. You're right. That is a lie.
That's why they're mad. That's literally what they're saying.
Why they're mad is because he refused to condemn like one of the most egregious displays of white nationalism in this country.
How many times has Trump condemned white supremacy?
I don't know, but he seems really reluctant to do it compared to other people.
A lot.
Have you seen the clip of him on, was it Jake Tapper, where he asks him to like denounce the KKK and he just won't do it?
Have you seen literally the 57 times Trump's been like, why do I keep getting asked to do this and I do it every time?
Because he just really struggles to do it. And it's like, hey, why are you so reluctant to do this versus every other politician who, like, would you denounce the KKK, Tim?
No.
Wait, what? Why not?
Because it's a bullshit smear tactic. PR
Ask me,
game.
I'll say yes. Why not?
Because you're in a cult.
I'm in a cult because I will immediately denounce the KKK because I think the evil racist lynching group is bad.
Why are you asking me to denounce the Klan?
I'm asking you not because I think you support them. I'm asking you because it's showing how easy it is to denounce them, and he struggles with this. And it raises questions where it's like, hey, why is it?
Doesn't.
Yes, it absolutely does. If he says,
this is why Trump won the popular vote.
If he lies on national television when someone says, "Hey, will you denounce David Duke?" and he says, "I don't know who David Duke is,"
that's a great answer.
Well, no, because in 2000 he said, "I'm leaving the Reformist Party because David Duke is part of it." So he did know who David Duke was.
No, he doesn't.
Isn't that like prove the point though? If
he knows who he is,
party,
bro.
so they try this.
If he knows who a character
prior,
is and then pretends like he doesn't understand the concept of the KKK, he says, "I don't know this group."
I'm going to say it again.
Does this not raise questions, Tim?
It does not.
Why not?
I've got videos that I've been making. I've been making online videos where I talk for hours for like 16, 17
You know what the
years.
KKK is?
Indeed, I do.
Okay, so why would he say, "I don't know what that is"?
And if someone
does that bother you?
If someone went back and said, "Tim, you know what's really funny? I'll tell you this: when Andrew Tate got really big,
Yeah.
and everyone was talking about Andrew Tate, I was like, "Don't I know that guy? Oh yeah, holy shit!"
He was on the show.
8 years ago, he had DM'd me about the field reporting stuff. He had like 40,000 followers. If someone had asked me, "What do you think of Andrew Tate?" I'd be like, honestly, I don't know the guy. Bullshit. You were DMing with him 8 years ago. I'd be like, fuck, I didn't even realize.
Yeah, but that's very different from citing him specifically as the
20 years
reason
prior?
as the reason you ended a particular part of your political career. It's like specifically because of this man, and then also saying, "I don't know what the KKK is."
You understand the problem with that though? Is it's like, okay,
Literally, can we bring up the clip? Can we watch it?
I don't know what the Klan is.
Can we watch it?
In
Wait, hold on.
2015,
Look up Donald Trump denounced KKK.
No.
Let's look it up. Let's look it up. Maybe I'm
asking
quoting
you
it
a
wrong.
question.
I might be wrong. I think he said, "I don't know about that group."
Before we
I don't
pull
know
it
about
up,
the KKK.
my question to you is,
yes.
He said, "I don't know."
I don't want to say quote it verbatim, so let's watch it together.
Trump. But okay, so then I don't.
Trump
then what do
refusing
you
to
ask me
denounce the KKK.
While you look that up, do you understand the problem with that though? If it's 2015 and you're having a conversation with Trump and you're like, "Denounce David Duke," and he's like, "I don't know who that is," and you're like, "Yeah, you do, because here's you denouncing him 15 years ago."
He didn't actually bring it up. Right.
The point being, it's the same game. They've been doing it for decades. He gets bored of it. They just wait for him to not give a sufficient answer one time. And now 8 years later, we're discussing it like it's relevant to his policy.
Every other Republican politician can easily give the answer of, "Yeah, no, I don't like these white supremacist groups," but he struggles with it.
He did, as Tim said.
No, he
50
didn't.
times.
It took him days to denounce.
And we know about that one instance because that's
and the
one
KKK one,
they got
which is a
him.
completely different one, and also struggling to denounce the Proud Boys, which is another one. Like this keeps happening, right? So my question is. No, I'm not looking up. Has Trump condemned white supremacists? This is obvious. He said it in the thing. Look up the.
Well, hold on. You're asking me to pull a single thing out of context.
It's not out of context.
I just searched for Tim Klan white supremacy.
Look up the CNN clip with him talking. I think it's Jake Tapper, where he asked him like, "Hey, David Duke has endorsed you. Will you just quickly denounce him?" Which any reasonable person.
I'm just pulling up a bunch. I'm going to pull up all of it.
Can you just bring up the one I talked about?
You have no, you've been talking back and forth.
This one's embarrassing, by the way.
I would love to end it. I would love to end it.
I just Google search and I'm pulling up all that comes up.
Okay.
Well,
I'd like to watch that one.
But stand by the National Guard, it would be over. There'd be no problem.
Okay.
But they don't want to accept the National Guard.
You have repeatedly criticized the vice president for not specifically calling out Antifa and other left-wing extremist groups. But are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland?
Sure,
are you
I'm
prepared
willing to do
specifically
that, but
do it? Well, go ahead, sir.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. Do you want to call them? What do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
who would
white
you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and Proud
Boys. Stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something.
I think it's
virulent condemnation. Yeah.
I think it's fair to say it was a gaffe.
Yeah,
sure, if you want to say he
laughing.
fucked up there, but then if we look at the pattern of him failing to do this, and we can please watch the KKK clip, which I think is even worse than that one, which was bad, by the way, telling a white supremacist group to stand by and not, "Hey, yeah, these people are evil and I hate them." Like this is very like I said, you didn't want to do this because it was a smear tactic, but anyone asks any of these Republican politicians, "Do you denounce the KKK?" Yeah, fuck them, right? Easy. Because obviously, versus someone who's like clearly struggling to do this. Now, by the way, I don't think this makes Trump a white supremacist. Like, I think this is literally just he is very hesitant to alienate his base. But like, that's bad if you're emboldening like these really, really bad groups.
Last chance. Super Tuesday brings caucuses and primaries in 12 states. For Republicans, about half.
Right there.
About
Yeah.
what you're even talking about with.
Hold on.
I don't know anything about Dave.
Beginning with a new controversy surrounding Trump today. Here's Major Garrett.
I don't know anything about David Duke, okay? I don't know anything about what you're even talking about with white supremacy or white supremacists.
Donald Trump demurred when asked
that's not the
whether
full
he
clip.
could.
Yeah.
The full clip is much worse than that too.
I'm trying to find it. The only thing that comes up, I got to be honest, when I search for it, is that Trump condemns white supremacy.
Okay, well, I promise you that's not all that's.
I do agree with you.
I can find it for you.
I do agree with you. There's a longer clip. He basically was like, I know what you're talking about. I don't want to condemn him. Trump KKK CNN, and then it's like Trump campaign denounces Klan. Trump calls KKK Nazis repugnant. Trump denounces David Duke 2016. I mean, here you go. CNN politics. Trump denounces David Duke KKK.
Yeah, he did it eventually, I'm sure.
He's a bad person.
He
I
eventually
disavow.
condemned white supremacists.
So
Does it not raise any alarm bells? I mean,
not
I
really.
hate to do this. I hate to do this on stream, but I know it's in my video. If you go to my channel, you go to my most recent video, and you scroll to that exact clip, we can watch the whole thing in full.
But you're correct.
Why don't you want to show the clip?
I can't find it.
Well, I just said if you go to.
And also, I feel
don't
like
want to shamelessly promote myself, but if you go to my channel, it's in my most recent video, the Soy Pill. Like I know because I just released this on Tuesday, so I watched it like a million times.
What I'm trying to do is find the actual raw clip.
I
just need the title.
cut out the dead air of it, if that's what you're worried about.
For the same reason, I don't want to play the CBS Evening News clip. I'm trying to find the actual raw clip of what Trump said. That way, no one's going to say. So first of all, I agree with you. You're correct that when Trump was asked about it, he was like, "I don't know anything about it. I don't want to." And it was contentious. And then he came out later and said, "I do condemn them."
A gaffe?
No. I'd call it inconsequential, I guess.
You don't think that at all?
I have a transcript.
You don't think that at all emboldens the?
But this is NPR. People don't trust them. I don't know what group you're talking about. You wouldn't want me to condemn a group. I don't. Oh wait, what is this? I don't know anything about Dave. Why don't they have the video in here?
I know I got the video from.
Wait, hold on.
Too.
No. I don't know, man.
Well, does that not bother? Does that not give you pause that like someone you voted for is like struggling to denounce a hate group when every other person can immediately do it?
Let's just do this.
Well, answer the question.
I am, and it's called no, because I typed in Trump refuses KKK CNN. Trump condemns all white supremacists. Trump refuses to condemn white supremacists. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump stumbles on David Duke KKK twice. Right. That's the one I pulled up.
Okay.
Full interview. Trump denounces KKK. Trump, I totally disavow the Ku Klux Klan.
Sure.
Like, this is just a political non-story as far as I'm concerned.
So when the groups come out afterwards, when this happens and say, wow, we really feel emboldened by this person, and then you can see like a rising trend of these groups' influence, like I think that's a very demonstrable material harm.
People have no influence though, dude. The Proud Boys used to be a drinking club.
Steve Bannon
not around
is an
anymore.
alt-right person. He's like
he's not
hired by
alt-right.
Trump.
Steve Bannon is like a broadcaster.
No, he doesn't.
What do you mean? Does he not claim himself to be a proponent of the alt-right as he has since like 2016?
This is, man. You know what's really challenging in the political space is like.
What about Steve Bannon is an alt-right when he's
What does alt-right mean?
Alt-right, oh man, like to get me to define the concept of this.
Well, the AP has the AP guidelines.
What do you mean when you say alt-right?
The AP guidelines have a definition of what alt-right is.
Okay, and what's that?
White nationalist.
Okay.
Steve Bannon is not a white nationalist.
If that's the only criteria for it,
I
think that he might still be, but I'd have to look into.
He's not.
This. Okay.
Steve Bannon thinks we should tax the rich to oblivion. He thinks there should be a wealth tax on billionaires.
Okay, but that doesn't. No, I by the way, I already know this, but that doesn't make him not right.
No, he's not alt-right.
Well, first of all, there are Nazbols, which are Nazis who are like super pro like socialist weird policies, right? Like you can have a economic left policy and be on the right.
We had Steve Bannon on the show, and I asked him. I was like, "You've been called white nationalist." And he's like, "I have," and I was like,
"So he was playing dumb because of course he would know that, right?"
We were specifically referring to alt-right as white nationalist, and I was saying they're claiming you're racist, and he was like, I said there's a viral post on Reddit right now. It says this is the face of white supremacy, and he's like, I didn't realize they were saying that about me.
What was this, like 2016?
Yeah, well, no. He came on the show in 2022. 2?
So for 5 years of every mainstream media outlet reporting on him like that, and he's never heard of that?
Have you ever watched his show?
I've never watched the...
Did you know that he's pro wealth tax?
Wait. Can we not move on from the fact that
we're not moving on? I'm asking you about the policies of Steve Bannon,
right? So
and what you know about him.
I know that he has he wants to tax billionaires, right?
Why don't you like Steve Bannon?
Off the top of my head, I'd have to go look at all the articles that have been propagandized into my brain to force me to have this narrative. I can't remember right now.
Probably. I mean, if you watch his show, you might be like, "Whoa, this guy's Occupy Wall Street."
Yeah, okay, I can have people.
Steve Bannon, I called him a leftist.
No, hold on. If he's let's just say that he's like super mega leftist on this policy. Then why is he in the Trump cabinet voting for the Trump policies that are not getting us anywhere close to this?
Well, Bannon wants arrests.
Arrests for what?
He wants the government dismantled, broken, arrested.
But okay, look. No one is 100% aligned with like one policy, one party. I am on the left. I'm progressive, and I am pro-gun. Right? I have like policies.
The left is pro-gun, though.
Well, to the far left.
No, the left is pro-gun.
Liberals
are not.
Liberals in California are stupid anti-gun. Right? They're like putting taxes on ammo or like background checks on ammo, all this stupid shit. And I think that's dumb. Right? However, that doesn't make me not left. So the thing is, there are key principles that I have, like progressive tax rates, welfare state, that keep me in this party. That keep me in this party. If Steve Bannon has this leftist policy of taxing billionaires, but he's completely aligned in voting for the right policy. This is not the thing that is the deal breaker for him. This is not his principal value.
You can call him a liberal, but say he's on the right.
He's like in the Trump cabinet helping Trump win, which is right.
He's not in the Trump cabinet.
He was in 2016.
He got kicked out.
Okay, sure. But the point is the fact that who he
or he retired or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know if he got fired or what.
Yeah, like,
but who he aligns with and who he votes for.
A bunch of liberals are on the right.
What is if I'm a right wing person, if I say I'm right wing because I vote for Trump, but I support every other taxation progressive, I support gun rights progressive, I want to ban all guns, but abortion is my mainstream value. Am I on the left or am I on the right? Like,
so you're saying if you're
like
anti-gun?
Every single one of my policies is aligned with Bernie Sanders. However, I think abortion should be illegal in all cases, so I vote for Donald Trump because that's my delineating issue. What party am I in? What side of the aisle am I on?
Well, we can talk about tribal or philosophy. So
what I'm talking about
you could be a liberal Republican.
You're voting for the material outcomes that are caused by the Republican Party. So whether or not he wants to tax billionaires, he's voting for the party that is cutting taxes on billionaires in this new bill that they passed in 2017. So how does that make him on the left?
Steve Bannon?
Steve Bannon is helping out the party that is doing the opposite of this left-wing party, right?
You have to ask him or watch his show. Well, sure, my point was that he advocates for taxing the billionaires.
Sure. And if he's not doing anything to make that happen, why would that make him on the left?
Maybe he is. I don't know.
He's not. He's supporting Donald Trump.
See, this once again, like this is why I say the left is a cult. It's like a zero-sum reality.
This isn't zero-sum. This is why do I vote the way I do? You vote for Trump because you think that these policies that you want are going to happen, right? Like,
well, because they did.
Sure. And what I'm saying is if you say, hey, I'm a liberal because XYZ policy, but I vote for the exact opposite person on all these other ones because, let's say this.
You're in a cult.
No, because your mainstream policy, you're delineating, like, this is my dividing line, is no new wars, no new conflicts. That's fine. That's why you vote for Trump. But then why pretend that you're a liberal on all these other things when you will vote for the material opposite of all of that?
People have different weights to what they find to be more important than other things.
Exactly. It's a hierarchy of what you want to happen, right?
I'm also anti-death penalty, and I don't go march for it.
Right, but you are going to vote for the party that's going to try to reinstitute it, right?
Indeed.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying.
Some things are more important than others.
Right, and if
war
is your delineating factor, that's
I think woke cultism and critical ideologies are a threat to the existence of this United States.
And that makes sense. Then why you would vote for Trump? Because they think the same thing. But that's not a progressive or liberal position, right?
It's a classically liberal position.
Okay, but it's not.
And traditionally liberal.
But it's not a liberal position.
Traditional liberals were not in favor of whatever the weird shit y'all are doing now, like cutting kids' balls off.
Well, I mean, trans stuff is new, but the point is that the policies of like
and that's my point. 20 years ago, if you went to a liberal and said, actually, we had a big video with like 500,000 views. We talked about how in like 2010 or whatever, College Humor made a video with Jack Black and a bunch of celebrities where they said, it's for Prop 8. And then the fake conservatives in it said they'll teach kids about sodomy. And the liberals go, that's a lie.
They'll teach kids about like gay sex.
But they do.
Why would they not do that?
So back in 2010.
I would disagree with that ad then, because like, of course, if gay people have sex with sodomy, then why would you say, sex ed,
liberals
but not for
back
sodomy?
then said, we are not going to teach kids about sodomy.
That's dumb.
And that's why 9 million Obama voters
disagree?
I think they should not teach children about sodomy.
Why not?
Children should not be taught about fetish, kink, things that can destroy your body.
Sodomy is not a fetish or a kink.
Yes,
it's the way that primarily gay people have sex.
It's not sexual reproduction.
Okay.
It's sexual gratification.
Right, but if you're trying to prepare children for the outside world, and this is something that might happen if they're gay, don't you want them to be safe and know about it?
No, you shouldn't
really
teach kids about gay anal sex.
Engage in that.
So anal sex in any circumstance is damaging to the body and
you
can
think
kill
that
you.
Gay people should never have sex?
You mean like anal sex?
Yeah.
That you should not have. No one should. Ask a doctor.
So yeah, okay. So no.
Go to a doctor and ask.
Okay, so if we have a philosophy on gay sex can cause harm because it can, like there are the colon cancers, like incontinence, there's things that
gastrointestinal infections and sepsis
so
and
bad
death.
things can happen. So if we're dealing with the reality of however, there exist all these gay people that are having sex, wouldn't you rather them at least understand how to do that the safest possible way than not do it at all? Because you can't prevent it from happening, right? We can't Thanos snap gay sex out of the world. People like gay sex. I'll say that.
You shouldn't teach children to have gay sex.
You're not teaching them to have gay sex. You're saying, hey, if you are gay and you happen to have a gay encounter, this is the safest way to do it. Here's
right. So don't do this.
They draw it out in like graphics.
I went to a progressive.
Bro, I'm a liberal, man. Wait, I don't think you should teach children to have gay sex.
Sorry, I'm sorry. You're a liberal, but you're saying the way that most, if not all, gay people engage in sex with each other shouldn't be done. That's not a liberal position.
Traditional liberalism.
Dude, come on.
Let's try this again.
No, you don't agree with the way that gay people have sex.
In the year 2000,
this is not. Look.
Do you believe that if in 2004 you went to a Democrat and said we should teach children about having anal sex, they would agree with you?
This is not.
Yes
what I
or
said.
no?
You said that.
Yes
no,
or
we
no?
already agreed on this. You said it was.
So
in the
that's my
commercial.
position.
Yeah.
Stop acting like you can't comprehend these
You're saying
things.
that gay people shouldn't have gay sex.
People of any types, male or female, should not put things in their bum-bums.
And that's not a liberal position from 20 years ago. No one said gay people shouldn't have sex. They said we shouldn't teach it in schools, apparently, from this commercial.
People should not be putting stuff up their butt.
Okay, well, they're doing it, and if they're doing it, I want them to be safe about it.
You know what else we
shouldn't do it.
We talk about in school the kids shouldn't do? Smoking. You know the smoking cigarettes? No, hear me out. Smoking cigarettes on average.
You're going to start your little dare group and go
talk
about how gay sex is
we're way
bad.
over.
I was going to finish my point first, which was going to be that smoking cigarettes on average takes 11 years off your life expectancy. Not good. Sodomy, being a practicing homosexual, removes 20 years on average from your life expectancy because of the things he's mentioning, not to mention the proliferation of STIs within the homosexual community and things of that nature.
What stops that is education. And
That's not true, actually, though. Unfortunately, I wish it were true, but it's not. So promoting unhealthy lifestyles
telling
to children
people how
is
to
bad.
have safer sex doesn't stop the spread of STIs.
Clearly, no.
What do you mean clearly no?
Because
is AIDS as big as it was in the 80s? Like, you know, like
because of massive viral subsidies, not because of condom proliferation.
That's the Jack Black
to be black, a girl, or gay. No, nothing could go wrong. So join us in this song of happy days for the gays. Nothing can go wrong.
Look, nobody's watching. It's time to spread some hate and put it in the Constitution.
Now, how?
Proposition 8.
Proposition 8. Great.
People listen to our plea. They'll teach kids about sodomy.
This is making me hate liberals.
That wasn't right.
I hate theater.
That's a lie. But it works, so we don't care. Now,
In California,
that
said
wasn't
no.
right. That's a lie, but it worked, so we don't care. Now you are sitting here telling us that's a good thing to do.
I think it is good to teach people that if they're going to engage in sex a certain way, they should do it safely.
We are in agreement of your worldview and my position from where I used to hang out with these people in California, and you are on the other side of that.
Listen to me.
And you're behind them. I don't know where you're at.
Tim, my liberal, super progressive middle school, when they did drug education, they did not teach us to do Molly and cocaine and all this. However, they had a very comprehensive slideshow of here's every drug you might encounter, because these things exist, all right? These things are out there, and especially in San Francisco, there's a good chance that you might find someone who's trying to sell it. And they're telling, hey, these are the risks of these drugs. These ones you should probably never, ever, ever do. These are the risks of these ones. This one won't harm you. This one's addictive. And they gave a very good comprehension of like how to deal with these things in real life. And people are having gay sex, all right? I don't know if you knew this, but gay guys love fucking each other in the ass. It's like their favorite thing to do. And so if they're going to go out and do that, I'd rather them be doing it safely than say, hey, actually just don't do it, because that's how abstinence education works, and it doesn't
I love
fucking
how
work.
we've gone from like the conservative traditional position of abstinence education and actual intercourse to, but what about shoving stuff up your ass?
Yeah, the thing that gay
so
people
Dare
do when they
didn't
have
work.
sex.
Dare didn't work, and
Right, it didn't.
So teaching kids about drugs actually backfired Maybe we should have just been like, let's not bring it up.
I agree. Dare was like this, hey, look out for this scary guy behind the, fucking school. It's going to
You're right. They should have been like, here's meth. Here's how you do it safely.
That literally, they're like, well, this one's really bad. You probably should never touch this. But however, this is what it looks like. And this is the effects of it. This is how you can avoid it, which is not what Dare did. Dare was this very much this abstinence only type of thing to just say no. It's a horrible, this is to my point.
You guys want to hear a funny story? So in Chicago, when fentanyl was starting to become like pop up on the scene, there was a fentanyl death on the south side where I lived. And the local news did a breaking story. At the corner of 63rd and Sacramento, an individual was found overdosed, having taken a super potent super heroin, they're calling it, called fentanyl.
Okay.
The next day, there were 16 dead. You know why?
Because everyone went to try it?
Yeah.
Okay.
They said, everyone watch out for this crazy super heroin. And people ran full speed to go get it.
Do you think those are heroin addicts, though? Because if I was a heroin addict and I heard there's a super heroin, I would immediately go try it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Probably.
This is different from like...
We are way over, so I do apologize, but we do got to wrap things up.
Okay.
But I do appreciate you coming. I thought it's always fun to have these conversations, as contentious as they may become. So I do appreciate you coming, and John...
No, this is a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll do more, and hopefully we can have you come for one of our live shows.
Should I do a call out to the other like leftist himbo that won't come on shows like this?
Ooh, the himbo,
the Hassan Piker. Yeah, should I call him out?
I will. You don't have to call him out, but I
should, right?
I actually will defend Hassan because there are these personalities that I really despise, where every thumbnail they make is a random picture of Trump, and then the title is just Trump says bad thing, Trump does bad thing. And it's not actually news. It's like Trump looks disheveled and angry, and they get millions of views. But Hassan doesn't do that. He actually talks about news stories. He's just a leftist, so I respect it. Okay. But you shout out whatever you want to shout out. Hopefully we can have you at our live shows in the future.
I'll call. So yeah, I'm the Soy Pill on YouTube. I do video essays. If you think I was even remotely good faith here, please go watch them. Although my most recent video does feature Trump.
Tim, look at his most recent
yeah, exactly what you just described, which is Trump, and the period is making his face Hitler. But yeah.
But is it an argument?
My argument, you heard most of my argument.
He's talking about the fine people thing, but the thumbnail is like Trump like this, and then he's got a Hitler.
That's fine. I'm saying like,
Donald Trump said this egregiously big gaffe, and look how disheveled he looks in this photo.
They just go, oh my God, Donald Trump was on the news today. He looks crazy. It's getting so bad.
Trump derangement syndrome is real. My dad has it, and I'm trying to cure him.
Perhaps you mean something more like Trump had a bad day.
That is exactly what I was talking about. That was the day of the election. Yeah. That was a fun one. I really like that photo of him.
Yeah, but again, like, I have no problem with periodically you talk about Trump or criticize him. That's fine. Like, your videos are, you're talking about things. You're making arguments.
I am.
Does the left hate America? Yeah. Does Trump incite violence? Like, that's what is toxic man. That's all fine. I'm fine with it.
I'm glad.
I'm saying,
you should subscribe too.
You look at some of these channels, which I name too often, and like every single video is just a random screenshot of Trump. Anyway, did you want to?
Oh, yeah. No, let me call out Hassan Piker. Hassan Piker, I challenge you for the throne of Twitch and the soul of America's young men. You get these aspirations of anti-Semitism and being a himbo. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm a bigger himbo. I'm Jewish, and I'm more anti-Semitic than you because I have to live with Jews, okay? While you were complaining about Israel and their bombing campaign in Gaza, I was there on Birthright having to listen to their stupid fucking arguments. And you hold your swastika sword in front of Ethan Klein while I have felt the blade of the circumcision knife, okay? So no one is more anti-Semitic than me, so I challenge you, Hassan, for the throne of himbo Twitch. Meet me in the ring.
Well, how about you, John?
Yeah, you can find me at youtube.com/John Doyle, and I talk about stuff not maybe pertaining to the foreskin or lack thereof or anything like that, but it's a good time.
Right on. Okay, we went a little bit over. We got to bounce now. We are back tonight. Timcast IRL. Roseanne's going to be here. It's going to be fun. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see y'all then.